My name's Travis, I'm 28, and I guess you could say my family has always had a complicated relationship with me. On the outside, we look like the picture-perfect suburban family. Dad with his neat business suits and I know everything attitude. Mom who insists on keeping the peace, but always seems to side with him. And my younger sister Rachel, the golden child who could set the house on fire and somehow still be called spirited instead of reckless. Then there's me, the one who always worked hard, tried to keep my head down, and still somehow ended up treated like the outsider. For as long as I can remember, Christmas has been their stage. Every year was the same pattern. Rachel got the spotlight, Dad made speeches about family values, and Mom busied herself with making everything appear perfect while ignoring the not-so-perfect comments thrown my way. I learned to deal with the passive-aggressive digs, the comparisons, the little reminders that I wasn't quite one of them in the way Rachel was. But this past year, I thought maybe things had shifted. I had a good job, stable income, and for once I wanted to contribute to the holiday, to make it feel like I wasn't just tagging along in their world. That's how the chalet came in. I'd found this beautiful cabin-style chalet up in the mountains, snow all around, wood-burning fireplace, big windows looking out on the slopes. It was the kind of holiday getaway people put on postcards. I spent weeks searching for the right spot, calculating my budget, and eventually booked the whole place. $8,000, gone in a blink, but worth it because I thought, maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd see that I cared, that I wanted to be part of the family Christmas tradition in a bigger way. I even sent Dad the reservation confirmation so he could brag about it to his friends. He didn't thank me, just said something like, "Good, that's the least you could do." At the time, I brushed it off. That was just Dad, never really giving me credit, but also never saying no. But as December crept closer, the cracks started showing again. Rachel kept calling it her chalet trip, as if I'd booked it for her. She even posted about it on social media, saying, "Can't wait for our family Christmas at the chalet Dad rented." That one stung. I wasn't even mentioned. When I asked her why she phrased it like that, she just laughed and said, "Relax, Travis, no one cares who booked it. It's all Dad's idea anyway." That should have been my first real warning. But I still wanted to believe. I wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me with some gratitude once we all arrived. Instead, things came to a head on an ordinary Wednesday night in early December. I had stopped by my parents' house after work, just to drop off some boxes of decorations I'd picked up. They were sitting in the living room, sipping wine like always, and Rachel was sprawled on the couch talking about what clothes she'd bring. I was halfway through saying how I'd stocked up on groceries for the chalet when Dad interrupted me. "You're not invited to Christmas this year," he snapped, like he was telling me to take out the trash. I froze, the words not even registering at first. "What?" I asked, thinking maybe I misheard. "You heard me," he said flatly, swirling his wine glass. "It's going to be a family-only Christmas. We don't need complications. You can do your own thing." I remember laughing under my breath, more out of disbelief than humor. "Family only? I'm literally your son." Rachel smirked at me from the couch. "Dad just means it's going to be less stressful without you. Don't make a scene, Travis." And Mom, sweet, always neutral Mom, just gave me that pitying look, like I was a stranger asking for a place to stay. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. We want peace this year." I can't explain what I felt in that moment. Hurt, yes. Betrayal, of course. But mostly it was this cold clarity, like a curtain had dropped and I was finally seeing them for what they really were. For years I'd been chasing scraps of validation, hoping to belong, and in one sentence Dad made it clear I never really did. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded, set the box of decorations down on the floor, and said, "Fine." They probably thought I was sulking, that I'd go home and cry about being left out. But in reality, my mind was already moving. I remembered that chalet reservation sitting in my inbox, the one booked under my name, with my card, my money. And as I walked out of their house that night, their smug faces behind me, I realized something. They thought they had Christmas wrapped up, thought they could erase me like I was nothing. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I sat at my laptop, pulled up the bank transfers, and quietly moved the holiday fund I'd sent to Dad back into my account. $8,000 slid back where it belonged. Then I opened the chalet booking and, with a single click, canceled the entire reservation. No penalty. It was still early enough. The best part? The booking was under Dad's name on paper because I'd wanted him to feel involved. But the payments? Those were mine. Meaning when the cancellation went through, the credit returned to me. I didn't tell them, of course. I went to bed with a strange calm, half expecting some fallout. And sure enough, the next morning my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 31 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, and one message that stopped me in my tracks. And that's exactly where things really began to unravel. The message was from my dad. Short, clipped, the kind of thing he sent when he thought he still had control over the situation. Call me back. Now, I didn't. I sat there with my coffee, scrolling through his previous voicemails, each one angrier than the last. First it was confusion. Travis, there's some kind of mistake. The chalet reservation isn't showing up on my account. Call them and fix it. Then it shifted to irritation. This isn't funny. If you're pulling some stunt, you better undo it immediately. And finally, the inevitable rage. You think this makes you clever? You've embarrassed me, Travis. Do you understand that? Fix this. Now, embarrassed him. That's what mattered most. Not the fact that his son was supposedly not invited to Christmas. Not the sheer audacity of cutting me out after I'd paid for everything. No, the great sin here was that his friends and extended family would soon find out the big chalet trip wasn't happening. His pride was hurt, and in his world, that was unforgivable. By noon, Rachel started messaging me too. Her tone was worse than Dad's, less angry, more entitled. Are you seriously doing this to us? You promised we'd have Christmas at the chalet. All my friends know about it, Travis. I already told everyone. Do you even care what this does to me? I could almost hear her whining voice through the text. I didn't reply. Silence was more powerful than anything I could have typed back. That evening, though, the real games began. Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a casserole like she always did when she wanted to soften bad news. She let herself in with the spare key I hadn't even realized she still had. Travis, she said in that practiced sweet tone, I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. You know your father. He speaks harshly sometimes. He didn't mean you weren't invited. It was just tension talking. I looked at her, genuinely curious. So now I'm invited? Her smile faltered, but she pressed on. Of course, but only if you fix the chalet issue. Your father's reputation is on the line. People are expecting this trip. It would mean so much to everyone if you just handled it quietly. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. It wasn't about me being included. It was about me cleaning up their mess. I asked, and if I don't? She put the casserole down on my counter, folded her hands together like she was praying, and sighed. Then I'm afraid you'll be making things very difficult for this family. Do you really want to ruin Christmas for your sister? There it was again. Always Rachel. Always her happiness above all else. I remembered birthdays where she got expensive gifts and I got practical ones like socks or notebooks. I remembered the time she crashed my car and my parents told me to stop being selfish because Rachel's been through enough stress. The same pattern was playing out again, my sacrifice, her spotlight. I didn't give Mom the reaction she wanted. I just said, thanks for the casserole, and walked her to the door. She looked at me with this sad little expression, like I was the problem child throwing a tantrum, and said, your father's very disappointed in you. That night, I got added to a new group chat Rachel created. The name of it? Christmas at the Chalet Snowflake Christmas Street. The irony nearly killed me. She must not have realized I'd canceled everything, because the messages were filled with her gushing about ski outfits, champagne, and the Instagram photos she'd take by the fireplace. Dad chimed in once with, I'll handle the wine, don't worry. Mom sent emojis. It was like they were trying to pretend I wasn't even there, even though I was the one who had made it possible. Finally, Rachel tagged me. Travis, can you send the updated booking confirmation? Dad wants to make sure the dinner reservations are lined up. I stared at the message for a long time, debating what to do. Every instinct told me to blast the truth right there in the chat, to expose them for the greedy, entitled family they'd always been. But something inside me whispered that it wasn't time. Not yet. Let them spin their fantasies a little longer. Let them believe everything was under control. The longer they dangled on the hook, the sweeter it would be when reality finally snapped tight. The tension only escalated from there. Over the next week, they began dropping hints to extended family members, boasting about the chalet trip, making it clear that Rachel was somehow hosting it. One of my aunts even called me, confused, saying, Your sister told me you're not coming this year. That can't be right, can it? When I told her calmly that Dad had uninvited me, she gasped and said, "But you're the one who paid." Word started spreading. I could feel their perfect little facade cracking at the edges. And with every crack, their texts grew more frantic, more desperate. But nothing prepared me for the night Dad himself showed up at my apartment door, not with anger this time, but with something far worse, fake charm. He stood there in his pressed coat, holding a bottle of wine like we were old friends. "Travis, son," he said smoothly, "we need to talk about this chalet situation. I know you're upset, but let's be adults. We can work something out." And that's when I realized they weren't just panicking. They were scheming. Dad didn't step inside right away. He lingered at the doorway like a salesman, the kind who won't leave until you sign on the dotted line. He was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the tight, calculated kind I'd seen him use in business meetings when I was younger. The kind that meant he was already thinking 10 steps ahead, and I was just another pawn. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door wider and let him in. He set the bottle of wine on my counter without asking, like he owned the place. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "Listen, about what I said the other night, not invited." That was harsh. I was frustrated. You know how things get. I didn't answer. I just let him keep talking. He shifted in his seat. "Your sister's been under a lot of stress lately. Her job's shaky. She's worried about money. And this chalet trip, well, it's important for her. She wants to impress her friends, keep her reputation intact. You understand, don't you?" There it was. The speech I'd been expecting. Rachel's feelings as the ultimate priority, again. My role was to patch up her life, to make sure she always looked good while I stayed invisible. Dad cleared his throat and leaned back. "So here's what we'll do. You'll rebook the chalet. Use your card again. I know you can afford it. Put it under my name so I can manage things properly. In return, we'll talk about making you more involved in family decisions moving forward. You want that, right? To be part of things." The words hit me harder than I expected. More involved. As if I hadn't been trying to be part of things all along. As if belonging to my own family was some kind of reward he could dangle in front of me, if only I paid the price. I kept my voice steady. "So let me get this straight. You want me to rebook an $8,000 trip after you told me I wasn't invited, just so Rachel doesn't get embarrassed?" His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back in place. "It's not about embarrassment. It's about family unity. You wouldn't want to be responsible for ruining Christmas, would you?" I almost laughed. Family unity. The phrase sounded ridiculous coming from him. But I stayed quiet, letting the silence grow heavier. Dad hated silence. He always rushed to fill it. And sure enough, he started talking again, but this time his tone hardened. "If you refuse, Travis, you're making a very clear statement. You're telling your mother, your sister, everyone, that you don't care about them. And if that's the road you want to take," he paused, eyes narrowing, "then don't expect us to be there for you when you need us." That was the betrayal, not the words themselves. I'd known deep down for years they'd never really be there for me. It was the coldness behind them, the transactional way he laid it out. Family, to him, wasn't love or loyalty. It was leverage. I swallowed hard, keeping my emotions in check. "So you're threatening to cut me off unless I pay for everything again?" Dad leaned back, crossing his arms. "Not a threat, just reality. You're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing's free." That line broke something in me. I remembered all the times I'd gone out of my way to help them, the loans I gave when Dad's investments tanked, the weekends I spent fixing things around their house, the endless patience I'd shown while Rachel was praised for doing the bare minimum. And here he was, looking me dead in the eye and saying none of it mattered unless I opened my wallet again. I don't know if he saw the shift in my expression, but for the first time that night, I think he realized I wasn't going to cave. His fake charm cracked, just slightly, and he muttered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Travis." But the betrayal wasn't finished. 2 days later, I got a call from my bank. A flagged transaction. Someone had tried to use my account details to make a large purchase, a reservation deposit for a chalet. And the name on the attempted booking? My father's. That was the moment the last thread of trust snapped. When the bank told me about the attempted booking, my first reaction wasn't even anger. It was this strange, hollow feeling, like the floor had dropped out from under me. I'd suspected Dad might try to manipulate me, but I hadn't expected him to stoop so low as to actually attempt fraud with my own information. The bank rep explained gently that the transaction had been flagged because the billing name didn't match the account holder. Otherwise, it might have gone through. I thanked them, hung up, and sat there staring at my phone, numb. My own father had tried to steal from me. There was no longer even a thin veil of family loyalty holding us together. This was survival for him. If he couldn't control me with words, he'd try with money. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying everything. Rachel posting about her chalet, Mom showing up with her casserole and guilt trips, Dad's smug smile in my apartment, and now this. The betrayal was layered, heavy, and for the first time in my life, I realized something that both terrified and freed me. I didn't have a family. Not really. The next few days were brutal. Rachel went into overdrive on social media, painting me as the villain. She wrote some vague post about selfish people who ruin everything. And, of course, all her friends chimed in with sympathy. A cousin even texted me privately saying, "Did you really cancel Christmas just to spite them?" The narrative had shifted. I wasn't just left out anymore. I was being painted as the bad guy, the reason the family was falling apart. Mom sent message after message begging me to just fix this. She said things like, "Your father is under so much stress," and "Rachel's heartbroken. You know how important this is to her." Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge what they'd done to me. At work, I found it hard to focus. I'd be sitting at my desk, spreadsheets open, but my mind would drift back to the look in Dad's eyes when he said, "Nothing's free." The words echoed like a curse, reminding me that in his world, love came with a price tag. My performance slipped. I stayed late just to avoid going home and sitting alone in the silence. And the loneliness hit me hard. Christmas lights went up around the city, couples strolled hand in hand through decorated streets. Kids pressed their faces against toy store windows. Everywhere I looked, people were wrapped in warmth, laughter, togetherness. And me? I had a one-bedroom apartment and a stack of unanswered messages reminding me how unwanted I was. I'll admit, there was one night where I almost broke. I sat with my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the "Call Dad" button, thinking maybe if I just apologized, maybe if I just gave in, I'd get my family back. But then I remembered the bank call, the fraudulent booking, and the hollow in my chest filled with something different, resolve. That was the turning point. I started small. I pulled together every document I had. Emails confirming the chalet was booked under my name, the cancellation refund, the flagged fraud notice from the bank. I backed up Rachel's posts, her texts demanding I fix things, Dad's threatening voicemail. For the first time, I stopped reacting emotionally and started looking at the situation like a chess game. Every move they made, I'd counter. I didn't tell them what I was doing. On the surface, I went quiet. I stopped answering calls, ignored the guilt-ridden messages, let them believe I was sulking in shame. Meanwhile, I was laying bricks for something stronger, something they wouldn't see coming. But before I could even put my plan in motion, they managed to push me lower. One evening, about a week before Christmas, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a typed letter, cold, formal. It was from Dad, though unsigned. In it, he stated that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings until I learned to respect the sacrifices they had made for me. He wrote that Rachel deserved the chalet because she had proven herself loyal, while I had only brought conflict and embarrassment. And the last line, I'll never forget it. "You are not needed in this family, Travis. Consider this your warning." I sat on the floor of my apartment, letter in hand, staring at those words until the letters blurred. That was rock bottom, the kind of pain that settles deep in your chest and refuses to move. But even in that pit, something inside me shifted again. The boy who had always craved their approval, always bent himself to fit their mold, that boy was gone. What remained was quieter, sharper, more deliberate. I wasn't going to fight for their love anymore. I was going to make sure they understood what it felt like to lose something they thought they controlled. And so, in the silence of that empty apartment, I began to plan. After that letter, something inside me snapped into focus. It was like my entire life up until that moment had been spent waiting for a nod of approval that was never coming, and suddenly, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Their words, "You are not needed in this family," instead of crushing me, gave me a strange kind of freedom. If I wasn't needed, then I owed them nothing. And if I owed them nothing, I could finally start living on my own terms. The first step was cutting off the lifelines they'd been quietly draining. For years, I'd been helping in ways I never really acknowledged. When Rachel overdrafted her account, I'd quietly sent her money. When Dad's investments dipped, I'd covered a bill here and there. Even little things, groceries, gas, utilities, I'd chipped in more often than not. It was habit, born from guilt, from always wanting to prove I belonged. But no more. I shut it all down. Changed my online banking passwords, canceled the spare credit card Mom had access to for emergencies, even rerouted my mail so they couldn't snoop. It was like turning off a series of taps that had been leaking for years. Then I turned inward. At work, instead of dragging my feet, I started showing up early, putting in effort, and volunteering for projects I used to avoid. I think part of me needed to bury myself in something productive, but another part knew that every hour I invested in myself was a step further away from their shadow. Within weeks, my boss noticed. By the new year, I was sitting in a meeting hearing the words promotion and salary increase. For the first time, I felt momentum. My bank account grew. My evenings weren't spent scrolling through their manipulative messages. I deleted them all. Instead, I started going to the gym after work, something I'd put off for years. The weights, the sweat, the small but steady progress. It all became a ritual. My body grew stronger, my confidence steadier. I wasn't the same guy who sat on the floor clutching that letter anymore. The change bled into other areas of my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd distanced myself from because my family never liked them. One of them, a college buddy named Mason, ran his own small marketing business and invited me to help out with some freelance work. What started as a side project quickly turned into a significant stream of income. Mason even joked, "Man, you've been hiding your skills too long. If your family doesn't appreciate you, don't worry, other people will." Those words stuck. For so long, I'd measured my worth by their standards. But outside their bubble, I was valued, respected, even admired. And here's where the real power shift began. Remember all the documents I'd been quietly gathering? The chalet receipts, Rachel's posts, the bank fraud alert, Dad's voicemail? I started putting them together like puzzle pieces, not out of spite at first, but as a reminder to myself. I wasn't crazy. The evidence was right there. They had tried to erase me, manipulate me, even steal from me. And I had the proof. The more I looked at it, the clearer it became. If I wanted revenge, it wouldn't be through yelling matches or emotional pleas. It would be through precision, through patience, through letting them dig their own hole, while I stood at the edge with the spotlight. Meanwhile, life outside their orbit only got brighter. Mason introduced me to contacts who opened doors I never imagined. New contracts, bigger clients, more income than I'd ever had before. I moved into a bigger apartment, one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Every night, I'd stand there, glass of wine in hand, looking at the lights twinkling across the horizon and think, this is mine. Not theirs. Mine. It wasn't about money or status. It was about finally building something they couldn't touch, something they couldn't claim credit for or take away. And every step forward fueled the fire in me, not of desperation anymore, but of resolve. They still sent messages, of course. Rachel tried the guilt angle. You're ruining everything. Why are you doing this to us? Dad sent veiled threats about burning bridges. Mom played the martyr, writing things like, I lie awake at night worrying about you. But where those words once cut, now they barely grazed me. I didn't even reply. Silence became my sharpest weapon. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. They had already lost their grip on me. And soon, they'd lose a lot more than that. But I wasn't going to rush it. I was going to let time and success do their work, let them grow comfortable in their illusions. Because when the moment came to strike back, it wouldn't just be satisfying, it would be undeniable. And then, one afternoon, I learned something that changed everything. Something that turned all my quiet planning into a clear, sharp path toward revenge. The opportunity came on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing feels remarkable until something shifts beneath the surface. I was in Mason's office, helping him prep a presentation for a new client. While he took a call, I scrolled through my email and noticed a message from my aunt, the same one who'd called me confused weeks earlier about the chalet. She was different from the rest of the family. Not perfect, but less cruel, more observant. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a PDF, a scanned copy of an email chain between my dad and several extended relatives. My heart pounded as I read. In it, Dad had written, "Rachel will be covering Christmas costs this year. She stepped up as the responsible one, and Travis has decided he's not able to contribute. He's embarrassed, so let's not bring it up in front of him." My stomach turned. Responsible one? Rachel hadn't even chipped in a dime, and Dad was rewriting the story to make me look like the failure. Worse, he was planting the idea that I couldn't afford things, that I was somehow beneath them. But as sick as it made me, the email was gold. It proved what I'd suspected all along, that their game wasn't just about cutting me out. It was about erasing me, rewriting the family narrative so I'd be seen as weak, selfish, disposable. And in that moment, something clicked in my mind. If they wanted to play with stories, then I'd make sure the truth told itself, loudly, unmistakably, in a way they couldn't twist. The timing was perfect too. My promotion had just gone through, doubling my salary. The freelance contracts with Mason were thriving. My savings account looked healthier than it ever had. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was in a position of strength. Financially stable, professionally respected, socially connected. All the pieces of a life they couldn't touch. That night, I started sketching out what I called the unveiling. Step 1. Document everything. I organized a folder on my laptop with labeled files, screenshots of Rachel's social media posts bragging about her chalet, bank statements proving the money came from me, the cancellation receipt, the fraud alert, and now, Dad's email chain. Every lie they told had a paper trail, and I had it. Step 2. Allies. My aunt was already halfway there by sending me the email. I reached out to her, cautiously at first, just to test the waters. Over coffee, she admitted she'd long suspected my parents favored Rachel unfairly, but hadn't realized how deep it ran. "Your father's pride is his weakness," she told me. "And Rachel, well, she believes whatever makes her look good." Her words stuck like pins on a map. Weaknesses, patterns, places to strike. Step 3. Position myself where they least expected. Instead of isolating, I started showing up at extended family gatherings again. Birthdays, casual dinners, anything that wasn't at my parents' house. At first, there were whispers, side glances, the awkwardness of people who didn't know which version of the story to believe. But I stayed calm, polite, present. I didn't defend myself. I didn't bring up the chalet. I just let them see me, steady job, new apartment, healthier, happier. Slowly, the doubt began to creep in. People noticed Rachel's gloating didn't match the reality they saw in me. And all the while, I kept building. Mason introduced me to someone who worked in event planning, and through that connection, I got the idea for the final stage of my plan. If my parents wanted to use family gatherings as their stage, then I'd make sure the biggest spotlight of all landed directly on them when the time was right. Because here's the thing about power. It's not always about having the loudest voice or the strongest grip. Sometimes it's about patience, about quietly stepping out of the shadows, stacking the evidence, aligning the pieces, and waiting until your opponents are so sure they've won that they never see the ground crumbling beneath them. By the time Christmas passed, my parents thought they'd succeeded. They spent the holidays sulking in their house. No chalet, no trip, but they spun the story that it was my fault, that I'd ruined everything. Rachel made a show of posting pictures with friends at some ski resort she'd tagged for clout, pretending it was the chalet. To the outside world, it looked like they were unbothered. But I knew the truth, and I knew what was coming. Because the next step wasn't just about defending myself, it was about turning the tables. About showing them, in front of everyone they'd tried to deceive, that the son they dismissed, erased, and tried to steal from wasn't weak. He was the one holding the cards. And the chance to flip the board was closer than they realized. The stage for my revenge arrived almost too perfectly. Late January, my aunt called to let me know there was going to be a big family gathering for my grandparents' anniversary. It wasn't just cousins and uncles this time. It was everyone. Aunts, uncles, family friends, even some of Dad's business associates who'd known me since I was a kid. In other words, the exact audience my parents loved to perform for. The moment I hung up, I knew this was it. The unveiling. I spent the next week polishing the folder of evidence I compiled. Every receipt, every screenshot, every voicemail was neatly arranged into a presentation file. one that I could pull up on my laptop and mirror onto a screen if needed. But the beauty of my plan was that I didn't even have to shout or accuse. I just had to show the truth, calmly, methodically, and let their own words do the damage. The night of the anniversary, I walked into the banquet hall wearing the suit I'd bought with my promotion bonus. Crisp, tailored, a quiet statement. I wasn't the struggling black sheep they'd painted me as. I shook hands, smiled, accepted compliments about how well I looked. My parents noticed me immediately. Dad stiffened, Mom's polite smile faltered, and Rachel rolled her eyes like I'd crashed her event. I could feel their discomfort simmering, and it only fueled me further. Dinner was served, wine poured, speeches made. Then came the casual conversations at the tables. I waited until Rachel brought up the chalet, because of course she couldn't resist. She laughed loudly, telling a cousin, "It was such a disaster because Travis bailed last minute. Honestly, Dad and I had to scramble to make Christmas decent. But, you know, some people just can't handle responsibility." Her words were bait, and I took them. Calmly, I set down my glass and said, "That's interesting, Rachel." Because from where I sit, it looked a little different. The table went quiet. Dad immediately interjected, his voice smooth but tense. "Let's not air family drama here. Tonight's about your grandparents." I smiled. "I agree. It's about family, which is why it might be nice for everyone to know the full story. Since you've already started it, Rachel." I pulled my laptop from my bag. I hadn't planned to make it theatrical, but sometimes the moment demands it. A projector had been set up for a slideshow of old photos, so I asked my cousin to help me switch inputs. Within seconds, my screen lit up the wall. And then, I showed them. First, the chalet confirmation email, with my name and payment clearly visible. Gasps went around the room. Then the cancellation notice, showing the refund had gone directly back to me. Then Rachel's post bragging about her chalet, followed by Dad's email chain claiming Rachel had paid for everything. And finally, the flagged fraud notice from the bank with his name on it. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't accuse or dramatize. I just said, "This is what happened. I paid for the chalet. They told me I wasn't invited. And when I canceled it, they tried to use my account information without permission." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear forks clink against plates. My parents' faces were pale, frozen. Rachel sputtered something about me twisting things, but the evidence was right there, undeniable. Then came the whispers. My uncle muttering. I knew something was off. My aunt shaking her head. Even one of Dad's business friends leaned back and said under his breath, "Unbelievable." And for once, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the one being dismissed. I was the one holding the truth, and everyone in that room knew it. Dad tried to salvage it. He stood up, glass in hand, and said, "Let's not blow this out of proportion. It was a misunderstanding." But I cut him off, still calm. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite someone. This was deliberate. And I think everyone here deserves to know what family values mean to you. The word values hung in the air like a blade. Mom finally broke down, whispering, "Travis, please stop." But it was too late. The damage was done. Their carefully crafted facade had shattered in front of the very people they wanted most to impress. I didn't stay much longer after that. I didn't need to. As I left the banquet hall, I could still hear the murmurs, the questions being fired at them. For the first time in my life, the weight was no longer on me, it was on them. And the satisfaction of that moment, walking out into the cold night air with my head high, was unlike anything I'd ever felt. But the fallout? That was only beginning. The fallout was immediate, and for once, I didn't have to lift a finger. The morning after the anniversary gathering, my phone buzzed nonstop. Not from my parents, they stayed silent, but from cousins, uncles, and even family friends who'd been there. The messages all had the same tone: disbelief, sympathy, quiet validation. "I can't believe they treated you that way. You were right to show everyone. If you ever want to spend the holidays with us instead, you're welcome." Word spread quickly. My parents' reputation, the thing they guarded most fiercely, was in tatters. Dad's colleagues who had been at the banquet stopped returning his calls. A business contact of his, one who had overheard the whole chalet debacle, ended a partnership, citing concerns about integrity. For a man who lived off appearances, it was the equivalent of watching his empire crumble. Rachel tried damage control on social media, posting vague statements about toxic siblings and jealousy, but no one bought it. Screenshots of her original bragging posts had already circulated among the family. Every attempt she made to paint herself as the victim only dug her deeper. Friends she'd tried so hard to impress unfollowed her. Her little circle of admirers shrank overnight. And Mom, she withdrew completely. For years she'd played peacemaker, smoothing over Dad's outbursts and Rachel's entitlement. But after that night, no one was listening to her "let's just move on" speeches anymore. People saw her silence for what it was: complicity. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to say a word. The silence I'd once hated had become my sharpest weapon, and it worked better than anything else. Weeks passed, and the distance grew. No more calls. No more guilt trips. No more letters taped to my door. It was as if they finally realized they had no leverage left. And the best part? I didn't miss them. For the first time in my life, I felt lighter. I had my job, my friends, my growing independence. I had peace. Then, one afternoon in March, I ran into my aunt again at a cafe. She told me that Dad had tried hosting a dinner to clear the air, but barely anyone showed up. The family wasn't interested in playing along with his version of reality anymore. "You don't realize it yet," she told me, smiling, "but you won. Not just against them, but against the hold they had on you." That night, I went home, stood at the window of my apartment, and looked out over the city lights. For years, I'd begged for a seat at their table, twisted myself to fit their mold, and carried the weight of their approval like a burden I couldn't shake. But I didn't need it anymore. I had built something stronger, something they couldn't rewrite or take away. Their chalet trip had collapsed. Their reputation had cracked. Their hold on me was gone. And as I turned away from the glass, a smile tugged at my lips. Because the truth was, they hadn't uninvited me from Christmas. I had uninvited them from my life. My name's Andy. I'm 29 years old. And if you asked anyone in my family to describe me growing up, they'd probably say something like quiet, reliable, maybe a little boring. I was never the star of the show, not compared to my cousin Nathan. He was the golden boy, the one everyone doted on. From the moment he was born, the kid had everything. Brand new cars the second he got his license, private schools with tuition fees that could cover a small mortgage, vacations to Europe while the rest of us were stuck at home. I used to sit at family dinners and just watch him soak up the attention, bragging about his newest gadget or trip, while the adults nodded approvingly like he was destined for greatness. Meanwhile, I was working odd jobs after school just to save up for a beat-up secondhand Honda. The contrast between us was obvious to everyone, and honestly, it stung. I'd hear my aunt boasting about Nathan's potential, while my own parents gave me those quiet, forced smiles that screamed, "We wish we could say the same." I wasn't angry about what Nathan had. I didn't want his flashy cars or his designer sneakers, but I couldn't help noticing the double standard. He could fail a class, and it was brushed off as just a phase. I'd pull a B+ instead of an A, and suddenly I wasn't applying myself. By the time I got to college, I learned to stay in my lane. I worked, studied, and kept my head down. My parents didn't pay my tuition, and scholarships only stretched so far, so I juggled jobs. I'd come home exhausted, sometimes missing family events because I couldn't afford to lose a shift. And you know what the running joke became at those gatherings? "Oh, Andy's too busy working at the grocery store to join us." My aunt laughed the loudest at that one, clinking her wine glass while Nathan recounted stories from his study abroad semester in Paris. But while they thought I was just barely scraping by, something else was happening quietly in the background. I'd stumbled into an internship at a small finance firm, the kind of place nobody brags about because it's not flashy. I kept at it, learned everything I could, and built connections. One opportunity led to another, and before I even graduated, I was making moves in a field where patience and strategy mattered more than quick results. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't say a word, because I knew in my family, any success I had would either be dismissed or treated like a fluke compared to Nathan's destiny. Fast forward to Thanksgiving this year. I'd been dreading it for weeks, but I showed up because, well, that's what you do. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon candles. Kids were running around, and there was Nathan holding court at the dining table. He had everyone's attention, as usual, telling some story about his networking trip in Miami, though we all knew his parents had footed the bill. I sat quietly at the corner, sipping my drink, trying to avoid the spotlight. Then, out of nowhere, the conversation shifted. My aunt asked about my job, her tone dripping with that condescending curiosity she always reserved for me. So, Andy, are you still, what was it again? Doing paperwork somewhere? The table chuckled. Nathan smirked. I forced a smile, the kind you use when you know there's no point correcting someone who's already decided what you're worth. I said something vague, like, yeah, I'm keeping busy. That should have been the end of it. But Nathan leaned back, loud enough for everyone to hear, and said, come on, man, you can tell us. It's not like you're hiding some secret empire. He laughed. Everyone else laughed too. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For years I'd swallowed their mockery, their low expectations, their smug little digs. But sitting there, listening to my cousin with his perfect hair and smug grin dismiss me in front of everyone, I realized, why was I still letting them treat me this way? Why was I protecting their image of me, pretending to be the underachiever they thought I was? I don't even remember the exact words I used, but I remember the silence that followed. The laughter cut off mid-chuckle, forks clinked against plates, and my aunt's face went pale. My dad just stared, wide-eyed, like he couldn't process what I'd just said. And Nathan? His smirk cracked, replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before, pure, raw panic. I hadn't planned to say it. I hadn't planned to reveal anything that night. But once it was out, once they knew the truth, there was no taking it back. And the fallout? Let's just say, Thanksgiving dinner was never going to be the same again. The silence after I spoke at that table hung in the air like heavy smoke, choking out all the laughter. I hadn't even shouted. I wasn't dramatic. I just laid out the truth in a simple, matter-of-fact way. Something along the lines of, I've actually done all right. The business I've built is valued around $30 million now. No bragging, no gloating, just a quiet truth I'd kept hidden. And that quiet truth was like a grenade tossed into the middle of our Thanksgiving dinner. For a few seconds, you could almost hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My aunt's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. Nathan's girlfriend, who had been leaning on his shoulder while giggling at his jokes, pulled back slightly, as if she'd just realized she might be betting on the wrong horse. My dad's jaw clenched, but he didn't say a word. And Nathan's face twisted in a way I'll never forget. He laughed, but it was forced, brittle, like glass about to crack. Yeah, right, he scoffed. Andy, come on, you don't have to exaggerate for attention. The problem was, I wasn't exaggerating. And from the look in my aunt's eyes, sharp, calculating, like a hawk, she knew I wasn't lying. From that moment on, the entire energy of the room shifted. Thanksgiving had always been Nathan's stage, but now, suddenly, I'd stolen the spotlight without even trying. And he couldn't stand it. The questions started trickling in, cautious at first, then more direct. My uncle leaned forward. Wait, 30 million? In what? My younger cousins whispered to each other. My aunt snapped. Are you being serious right now? She sounded less impressed and more suspicious, almost offended, like my success was some kind of personal insult to her parenting. I shrugged and said, I don't like to brag about it, but yes. I've worked hard, built a business, made the right investments. That's where I am now. That should have been it. We could have moved on to pie and football. But Nathan wasn't going to let it slide. His voice rose, sharp, almost desperate. You mean to tell me you somehow made $30 million while I've been busting my back in grad school and internships? That doesn't even make sense. I wanted to laugh. Busting his back? The kid had been handed everything on a silver platter. He'd switched majors twice, burned through his parents' money, and landed internships through my uncle's connections. I'd seen his hard work, posting selfies from rooftops in Miami and designer dinners in New York. But I didn't laugh. I just looked at him and said, it makes sense if you're not wasting every opportunity you're given. That was when the gloves came off. My aunt leaned in like a lawyer cross-examining a witness. And where exactly did this money come from, Andy? Because, forgive me, but it's very unusual for someone your age to just stumble into that kind of wealth. Her tone carried the same weight it had when I was a kid, and she used to scold me for not eating my vegetables. Except now, it was dripping with disbelief. I explained as calmly as I could, outlining the basics of what I'd done: finance, tech investments, reinvesting profits. I didn't give them details, they didn't deserve those, but enough so they knew it wasn't some fluke or lottery win. Nathan shook his head the whole time, muttering under his breath. At one point, he said loudly, he's lying. There's no way. And then he turned to my dad, looking for backup. Tell him, Uncle Jim. You don't believe this, do you? But my dad didn't say anything. He just sat there, stiff, his face unreadable. That silence hurt more than Nathan's outburst. For years, I'd been desperate for his approval, his acknowledgement, and now that I'd finally proven myself beyond question, he sat there like a statue. That's when the real manipulation began. My aunt shifted gears, her tone softening, but in that insincere, practiced way she used whenever she wanted something. Well, Andy, if this is true, then you should be proud. Truly, families should always support each other, especially in times of, well, financial need. There it was. The angle. I could almost see the cogs turning in her head. If I really had 30 million, then suddenly I wasn't just the ignored cousin. I was a resource, a wallet. She didn't even wait before diving in. Nathan has been working so hard to get through school, and things haven't been easy for him. You could really give him a boost, help him achieve his dreams. Isn't that what family does? I couldn't believe it. Not 10 minutes earlier, they'd been mocking me for doing paperwork somewhere. And now she was openly suggesting I bankroll her son. Nathan's head shot up, eyes wide, like he hadn't expected her to be so blatant. But then he smirked and leaned into it. Yeah, Andy. I mean, if you've got that much, helping out your cousin would be the right thing to do. It's not like you even need all that money. The entitlement in his voice made my skin crawl. I said nothing. I just sat there, swirling my drink, listening to them pitch this absurd narrative where I somehow owed Nathan for his years of luxury. My aunt kept going, saying things like, think about how much it would mean to your father to see his sons succeed together. Even though Nathan wasn't her son, she was dragging my dad into it, trying to guilt me into agreeing. My mom chimed in too, carefully at first, then with more insistence. Andy, maybe just listen. Your cousin has always looked up to you, a bald-faced lie, but she said it with such conviction that others at the table nodded along. This could bring the family closer. Meanwhile, Nathan sat back with his arms crossed, smirking like the outcome was already decided. And my dad? He still said nothing. The tension kept climbing. Every bite of food after that felt heavy, tasteless. My younger cousins whispered, clearly excited by the drama. Nathan's girlfriend avoided eye contact with me altogether, probably embarrassed by how desperate he looked. My aunt, though, she doubled down. It's not even about the money. It's about family legacy. Imagine what your grandfather would say if he knew you had the means to lift everyone up. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting Nathan's ego. I was up against a whole system of favoritism and entitlement that had been ingrained in this family for decades. They weren't proud of me. They weren't happy for me. They were circling, like vultures, waiting to pick at whatever scraps they thought I might toss their way. Every word out of their mouths made the air heavier. I could feel Nathan's jealousy boiling, his need to prove that even with all my success, he was still the star. And I could feel my aunt's greed wrapping around the table like vines, squeezing, pressing me to commit to something I hadn't even agreed to. By the time dessert was served, it wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a tribunal. I was no longer Andy, the quiet cousin who worked too much. I was Andy, the guy with 30 million, and in their eyes, that meant I was no longer family. I was an asset to be exploited. And as Nathan's voice grew louder, as my aunt's tone turned sharper, as my dad sat frozen in his silence, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving dinner. This was the start of a war. I left that table with my chest tight and my hands clenched under the napkin. I knew what was coming next, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The weeks after that Thanksgiving dinner felt like I was living in some alternate reality. Normally, the family would scatter back into their own routines, and I wouldn't hear from most of them until Christmas, maybe the occasional forwarded text about a birthday or a group chat joke. But this time was different. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. My phone, usually quiet, started buzzing constantly. My aunt, who hadn't texted me in months unless it was a reminder to bring dessert to a gathering, was now sending me cheerful little messages. Good morning, Andy. Hope you're doing well. Nathan was just talking about his plans for graduate school. So exciting. Maybe we can sit down and chat about how you could help him get started. Always with that sugary tone, but underneath it was the same sharp pressure. Give, give, give. My cousins, the ones who used to snicker at me when I pulled up in my dented old Honda, suddenly wanted to hang out. They'd never invited me to parties before, but now they were tagging me in posts, sending me links to fun investment opportunities, and hinting at vacations we could take as a family. But the worst part? My dad. For years, he'd been the quiet one, never outright cruel like my aunt, but never supportive either. He was the man of silence, the one whose approval I kept chasing like a carrot on a stick. And after Thanksgiving, I thought maybe, just maybe, the revelation of what I'd built would change things between us. I thought he'd look at me differently, maybe even tell me he was proud. Instead, he began acting like my success had been his idea all along. I'll never forget one Sunday dinner when he said, in front of everyone, "Andy always listened to my advice about money. That's why he's done so well." My fork nearly slipped from my hand. His advice? The man who used to tell me, "Don't take risks, just get a stable job, keep your head down." The same man who scolded me when I turned down an office job with benefits because I wanted to keep working on my business? Now, he was rewriting history so that my achievements looked like his legacy. I bit my tongue, but inside, a knot formed. And then came the betrayal. It started small, like the kind of thing you almost convince yourself you imagined. A cousin posting on Facebook about our family's success and tagging me in photos I'd never agreed to share. My aunt bragging at church about how her nephew is going to change Nathan's life. But then, one Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from a bank manager. "Hi, is this Andrew?" the man asked. "I just wanted to confirm some information regarding the joint account your father applied to open with you listed as the primary." I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" The man repeated it. My father had gone into a bank, tried to open an account with both our names, using my information. He must have gotten some of my details from old paperwork or conversations. My chest went tight, heat creeping up my neck. "No," I said firmly. "I did not authorize that. Cancel it immediately." The manager apologized, said nothing had been processed yet, but the implication was enough to rattle me. My own father had tried to tie his finances directly to mine, without asking, without even mentioning it. I didn't confront him right away. I needed time to breathe, to think. But the hits kept coming. 2 days later, I got a call from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. "Hey, man, just checking in. Your cousin Nathan reached out to me about this business thing. Is that legit?" My heart sank. I asked what Nathan had said, and my friend explained. Nathan had been contacting people in my network, using my name, dropping it casually into conversations, acting as though he was connected to my deals. Worse, he'd pitched a few people on investment opportunities and implied I was involved. I was furious. That wasn't just disrespect. That was dangerous. My reputation, my credibility, built brick by brick over years of grinding, and Nathan was using it like a toy. When I finally confronted him, he didn't even flinch. "Come on, Andy," he said with that smug grin. "I was just trying to get some momentum. People trust you, so why not? We're family. Your success is my success, right?" I wanted to scream at him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stared at him, trying to understand how he could believe what he was saying. But then I realized it wasn't just him. It was the entire family culture. They'd spent years treating me like the backup, the invisible one, and now that I had something they wanted, they saw no boundaries. It escalated quickly after that. My aunt hosted a dinner where she paraded Nathan around, talking about his bright future and how, with Andy's help, he'll finally achieve everything he deserves. She said it like it was a done deal, like my money was already earmarked for him. People clapped. Nathan beamed. And I sat there, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. But the final straw came a week later. I walked into my parents' house to find my dad and aunt sitting at the table with a stack of papers. Legal documents. They tried to play it off like a casual conversation, but when I pressed, they revealed the truth. They'd been drafting some kind of family trust, with my assets at the center. Without telling me, without asking me, they had already talked to a lawyer. "Andy," my aunt said smoothly, "this is for everyone's benefit. You don't want to isolate yourself, do you? Family takes care of each other. This way, your wealth will create security for generations." Nathan was leaning against the wall, arms folded, grinning like a cat who'd just lapped up cream. My father didn't look at me. He just cleared his throat and said, "It's the right thing to do, son. You've been blessed. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word landed like a knife. After years of working in silence, years of being dismissed, mocked, ignored, suddenly I was selfish because I didn't want to hand over the blood, sweat, and sleepless nights I'd poured into building something of my own. I remember staring at the papers, the room swimming around me. My hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. My own family had conspired behind my back to take control of everything I had built. They weren't even hiding it anymore. That was the moment something inside me broke. The trust, the little thread of loyalty I'd been clinging to, it snapped clean in two. I looked at their faces, my aunt's calculating smile, Nathan's smug satisfaction, my father's cold silence, and I knew I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't go back. And that night, as I sat alone, staring at the ceiling, one thought played over and over in my mind. They had no idea what was coming next. I don't think I've ever felt as hollow as I did after that night at my parents' house. Driving home, the roads blurred past me, the headlights of other cars streaking like white ghosts in the dark. I don't even remember the turns I took. I must have been running on autopilot. All I know is that when I finally stepped into my apartment, I sank onto the couch and just sat there, staring at nothing. It was the silence that got to me. My place was usually a sanctuary, quiet by design, but that night it pressed in on me, suffocating. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge and my own shallow breathing. I'd always known my family could be dismissive, even cruel at times, but what I'd witnessed, the papers on the table, the trust they'd drafted without me, it was like a mask had been ripped off, showing me the truth I'd been too naive to see. They didn't just envy me. They didn't just want to ride my coattails. They were willing to cut me out of my own life if it meant securing their piece of what I had built. That realization broke something inside me. For years, I'd carried around this quiet hope that maybe one day, if I worked hard enough, if I made something of myself, they'd see me differently. That my dad would finally look at me and say, "I'm proud of you." That my aunt would stop comparing me to Nathan and admit that I'd earned my place. I'd believed, foolishly, that family was something you could fix if you just tried hard enough. But staring at the ceiling that night, I realized I'd been chasing smoke. The days that followed felt like moving through quicksand. Work, which had always been my anchor, suddenly felt heavier. I'd sit in front of my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unable to focus. Calls came in, deals needed my attention, but my mind kept drifting back to their faces, the way they looked at me like I wasn't a person anymore, just a bank account with legs. I stopped answering their messages. The family group chat, usually buzzing with memes and updates about birthdays or random gossip, became unbearable to even glance at. Every ping made my stomach knot. My aunt kept sending me reminders about the trust, phrased like casual nudges. "We should finalize things soon, Andy. The lawyer is waiting." Nathan, emboldened by the silence, sent smug little texts like, "Thanks for finally stepping up, man. This is going to change everything for me." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I withdrew. I'd come home from work, drop my bag, and collapse into bed without eating. My appetite vanished. Sleep was restless, filled with fragmented dreams where I'd walk into a room and see my family rifling through my belongings, grinning as they counted stacks of money that weren't even there. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my chest tight, my hands trembling. It was the lowest I'd felt in years. One night, about a week later, I found myself pacing the apartment at 3 a.m., the city outside muffled by heavy rain. I kept replaying everything in my head. My dad's silence at Thanksgiving, my aunt's smug smile when she slid those papers across the table, Nathan's grin as though he'd already won. The anger was there, burning like coals, but it was buried under layers of exhaustion and grief. Because that's what it felt like, grief. Like I had lost something I'd never really had to begin with. I thought about cutting ties completely, just packing up, disappearing, leaving no trace. I had the means. I could have gone anywhere in the world and started fresh. But then, a question crept into my mind, one I couldn't shake. Why should I be the one to leave? Why should I give them the satisfaction of driving me away from the life I'd built with my own hands? That thought lodged itself in me, stubborn, refusing to leave. Still, the suffering didn't go away overnight. At Christmas, I stayed home alone. My mom called, her voice cracking as she begged me to come, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit at that table again, not after what they'd done. I stayed in, microwaved leftovers, and watched the snow fall outside, while families across the city gathered in warm, glowing rooms. The loneliness cut deep. January was worse. New Year's came and went, fireworks exploding outside my window while I sat in the dark. The text from my aunt grew sharper, more impatient. "We need to move forward, Andy. This delay is irresponsible." Nathan called once, his voice slick with false concern. "I know this is a big adjustment for you, man. But trust me, you'll feel better once you're not carrying all this weight alone." I hung up on him before he could finish. The lowest point came one evening when I caught myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my own reflection like I didn't recognize the man looking back. My eyes were sunken, dark circles etched beneath them. My shoulders slumped, my expression hollow. I looked like a shell, and for the first time, I whispered the question I'd been avoiding. What if they're right? What if I am being selfish? That thought scared me more than anything, because that was the seed they'd planted, watered with guilt and manipulation. And for a brief, terrifying moment, I almost believed it. But then something shifted. It happened quietly, like a flicker in the dark. I was sorting through old files on my desk, trying to distract myself, when I came across a crumpled receipt from years ago. It was from the tiny corner store where I used to grab cheap snacks during late-night shifts at the finance firm. On the back, in faded ink, I'd scribbled a note to myself: "Keep going. One day they'll see." I sat there, holding that scrap of paper, and it hit me. Back then, I didn't have anyone cheering me on. I didn't have support or recognition. All I had was myself. And somehow, against all odds, I'd made it here. That realization sparked something. Maybe my family would never see me for who I was. Maybe they'd never give me the validation I'd craved. But I didn't need them to. I never had. And if they thought they could break me, take from me, rewrite my story, they were wrong. From that moment, the fog began to lift, little by little. I still hurt. I still felt the sting of betrayal every time I remembered my father's silence or my aunt's greed. But beneath the pain, a new resolve started to form. I began moving differently. Quietly, carefully. I started documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every message they sent me about the trust or money. I reached out to a lawyer, not to act yet, but to understand my rights, to protect myself. I pulled my financial records tighter, securing accounts, changing passwords, locking down information they might have gotten their hands on. And though I hadn't yet decided what I would do, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them define me. Not anymore. The suffering hadn't ended. I still carried the weight every day. But beneath that weight, in the quiet hours of the night, a plan was beginning to take shape. They thought they had cornered me. They thought I was broken, pliable, ready to hand over everything. They had no idea. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that once you've been there, the climb up feels different. It's not immediate, not clean, but every small step starts to matter. For weeks I'd been drowning in the betrayal, replaying that image of my dad and aunt sliding those papers across the table. But slowly, bit by bit, I started reclaiming pieces of myself. It began with structure. I forced myself into routines. Wake up early, go for a run, eat something decent, shower, sit at my desk. At first it felt mechanical, like I was moving through molasses, but after a while, my body started to remember what discipline felt like. The fog in my head began to clear. Work, which had felt like a weight pressing me into the ground, started to feel like an escape again. I poured myself into it, focusing on projects, building new connections, and letting the noise of my family fade into the background. My lawyer gave me clarity too. I'll never forget sitting across from him in his downtown office as he scanned the messages and documents I collected. He raised an eyebrow and said, "They don't have a leg to stand on, Andy. Not legally. Everything you've built is yours, and unless you sign something over, no one can touch it." Those words were like air in my lungs. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath until then. I walked out of that office taller than I'd walked in. And then something else happened. Opportunities started rolling in. Maybe it was the new energy I was putting out, or maybe it was just timing, but within a month I had 3 new partnerships on the table, deals that could easily push my net worth even higher. I found myself sitting in glass-walled conference rooms, shaking hands with people who respected me not because of family ties or childhood reputation, but because of what I'd proven in the world. For the first time, I started to feel proud of myself. Not just quietly satisfied, but genuinely proud. Meanwhile, the family dynamic shifted in strange, almost predictable ways. My aunt grew more frantic in her messages. The cheerful tone disappeared, replaced with sharp reminders and passive-aggressive digs. It's selfish not to use what you've been given to help others. We've already told the lawyer you'll be moving forward. Don't embarrass us by backing out now. Nathan, on the other hand, got louder in public. He started posting photos online with captions like, "Big moves coming soon. Family legacy in the works." People who didn't know the full story probably thought he was the one pulling strings. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. I didn't respond to any of it. Not yet. Instead, I invested in myself. I upgraded my apartment, not ostentatiously, but enough to feel like a place I could breathe in. I hired a trainer, started taking better care of my body, rediscovered the joy of cooking real meals instead of just surviving off takeout. Slowly, the man in the mirror stopped looking like a ghost and started looking like me again. And in the professional world, my reputation grew. I was invited to speak at an industry conference, a small one at first, then larger. Standing on stage, explaining my strategies to a room full of people who scribbled notes and asked thoughtful questions, I felt a surge of confidence I'd never known. The applause at the end wasn't just noise. It was validation that I'd built something real, something that mattered. Of course, word traveled back to the family. It always did. At Easter, my cousin texted me a photo from the dinner table, Nathan red-faced, ranting about how Andy thinks he's some big shot now. Apparently, my aunt had tried to spin my success as a family achievement again, but Nathan wasn't satisfied with crumbs. He wanted the whole feast. The image of him stewing in his own bitterness while I was out in the world carving a path for myself was satisfying, in a way. But with success came new challenges. The more visible I became, the harder they tried to wedge themselves into my narrative. My aunt showed up uninvited at my office one afternoon, her smile brittle as she said, "We really need to finalize the trust, Andy. People are asking questions." She said it like she was saving me from scandal, when in reality, she was trying to pressure me. I had security escort her out. That felt like a turning point, finally drawing a line I should have drawn years ago. My father was more complicated. He didn't push as directly as my aunt, but he tried other tactics, emotional ones. He'd call and talk about the family name, about how much it meant to him that his son had done so well. Then, with a careful pause, he'd slip in something like, "It would mean even more if you used that success to make sure Nathan's future is secure." His voice was heavy with disappointment when I didn't agree. Each time he said those things, it stung less. At first, his silence and guilt trips tore at me, but as I grew stronger, I realized something vital. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need any of theirs. The more I accepted that, the freer I felt. And with that freedom came vision. I started planning for the future, not theirs, mine. I expanded my investments, launched a new project that quickly gained traction, and built a small but loyal team of people who believed in me. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was steering it. I kept the family at arm's length, but I didn't cut them off entirely. Part of me wanted to watch, to see just how far they'd go when they realized I wasn't bending. And they didn't disappoint. Rumors started circulating, whispers that I'd cheated, that I'd gotten lucky, that I'd stolen ideas. None of it stuck, but it revealed their desperation. What they didn't realize was that every step I took forward made their grip weaker. The stronger I became, the less power they had. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By summer, my life looked almost unrecognizable compared to that bleak winter. My company was thriving, my health was better, and I was waking up with purpose again. The family's calls and texts still came, but I'd stopped letting them dictate my mood. Each manipulation attempt became fuel for me, a reminder of why I had to keep moving forward. And yet, beneath the rise, I kept my eyes on them. I knew this wasn't over. People like my aunt and cousin didn't just back down. They'd push harder, scheme bigger, until they got what they wanted, or until I stopped them for good. And so, while the surface of my life glittered with progress, beneath it, I was preparing. Quietly, patiently, because one day soon, I knew the balance would tip, and when it did, I would be ready. By the time summer melted into fall, I had grown comfortable with the distance between me and my family. They were still circling, still trying their usual tactics, but I'd learned how to weather it. Every ignored call, every unanswered text, every meeting I refused hardened me a little more. But deep down, I knew ignoring them wouldn't be enough. If I didn't act, they'd never stop. My aunt's persistence wasn't going to fizzle out. Nathan's entitlement wasn't going to vanish. My dad's silence wasn't going to magically turn into support. They would push and push until either I gave in or I pushed back. That's when the idea of revenge stopped being some fleeting thought I shoved aside and started becoming a plan. It began with information. If there's one thing I've learned in business, it's that knowledge is leverage. I already had the texts, the emails, the legal drafts they'd tried to force through. But I needed more. I needed to know exactly how far they'd gone, and more importantly, how sloppy they'd been in trying to manipulate me. One evening, while reviewing some of my accounts, I noticed something odd. A small withdrawal attempt from an unfamiliar account had been flagged and stopped by the bank. When I investigated further, the name attached to the attempt nearly made me laugh. Nathan. He'd tried to link my account information to some online trading platform, probably thinking he could dip his hands into the flow and I'd be too distracted to notice. It was amateurish, clumsy, but it told me something vital. Nathan wasn't just greedy, he was reckless. And reckless people leave trails. I hired a private investigator, not for anything extreme, but to quietly watch the situation, track movements, and pull records I couldn't access myself. Within weeks, I had a folder thicker than I expected. Credit card statements showing Nathan living far beyond his means. Records of failed business pitches, each one using my name in some way. Even a few desperate emails he'd sent to investors where he claimed to be working in partnership with me. That folder was a goldmine. Proof, not just of their manipulation, but of outright fraud. But I didn't use it immediately. I let it sit, knowing that in the right hands, at the right time, it would carry more weight than a dozen angry confrontations. While that simmered in the background, I focused on solidifying my own position. I doubled down on work, and one particular opportunity came knocking that changed everything. A major firm approached me about a joint venture, something that would elevate my name from successful entrepreneur to legitimate industry leader. It wasn't just about money. It was about influence, credibility, and a seat at the table where decisions were made. I accepted, and when the press releases went out, splashing my name across business journals and online articles, the ripple effect was immediate. Calls poured in from people who had once ignored me. Invitations to panels, offers for collaborations, even notes from politicians who suddenly wanted to connect. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just wealthy, I was powerful. And with that power came options. The family, of course, noticed instantly. My mom left me a shaky voicemail. "Your father's been reading about you in the papers. He's proud, Andy. He really is. Maybe you could stop by for dinner." I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the unspoken pressure behind the words. Proud. He was proud now, apparently. After years of silence, now that strangers were clapping for me, my dad had decided I was worthy of the word. I didn't return her call. My aunt, however, wasn't so subtle. She stormed into my office building one afternoon, demanding to speak with me. Security held her at the front desk, but I could hear her voice echoing down the hall. "He owes us. This family made him who he is. Without us, he'd be nothing." When I finally walked out to face her, she froze, caught off guard by the fact that I wasn't hiding anymore. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "This is my building, not yours. Don't come here again." And then I turned and walked away, leaving her sputtering at the security desk. It was a small moment, but it was the first time I felt the power shift in real time. For years, I'd been the one shrinking in their presence, letting their words dictate my worth. Now, I was the one setting boundaries, and they couldn't handle it. But the real turning point came a few weeks later. I was at a networking event, speaking with a group of investors, when one of them mentioned casually, "Funny thing, I heard your cousin was pitching himself as your partner. Said you were backing his new venture. Is that true?" I smiled politely, masking the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "No," I said calmly. "That's not true. At all." But inside, a fire lit. Nathan wasn't just reckless anymore. He was encroaching on territory that could damage my reputation. If investors started believing his lies, it could unravel everything I'd worked for. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to go on the offensive. The next day, I pulled out the folder the private investigator had compiled. I laid it across my desk, page after page of evidence. Fraudulent pitches, debts, lies, reckless behavior. And as I looked at it, the plan crystallized. This wasn't just about protecting myself. This was about teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. But I also knew revenge wasn't just about striking back. It was about timing, about waiting until they were at their most confident, their most certain they had control, then pulling the rug out from under them. So I stayed quiet. I let them think I was still vulnerable, still hesitant. When Nathan bragged online about his partnership with me, I didn't correct him. When my aunt told people that the trust was being finalized, I didn't deny it. I let the narrative build, let them dig themselves deeper into the hole. And in the meantime, I tightened my own defenses. Every account secured, every connection informed of the truth, every potential ally quietly brought to my side. By the time I was done, they could scream and claw all they wanted, but they'd find nothing to hold on to. I wasn't the quiet, invisible cousin anymore. I was the man with 30 million, with influence, with evidence, and with patience. And as I watched them scramble and scheme, I realized something that almost made me laugh. They still thought they were in control. They had no idea I was setting the stage for their downfall. The week I decided to act felt oddly ordinary. Gray rain against the windows, my inbox politely humming along with updates. But inside, everything was electric. All the months of collecting evidence, quietly building alliances, and fortifying my life came together like a machine that had finally reached full pressure. I didn't feel like a man about to lash out. I felt like someone finally learning to use a tool he'd been holding all along. Revenge, to me, had never been about theatrics or humiliation for humiliation's sake. It was about removing the foot they'd kept on my neck for years and making sure they couldn't pretend the ground they'd stood on was anything but shaky. First, I tightened the legal screws. My lawyer and I filed a formal cease and desist to anyone who'd been circulating my name without authorization, and we sent carefully worded notices to the investors Nathan had cold emailed, attaching corroborating documents that proved A, he had misrepresented his relationship with me, and B, several of his past claims were demonstrably false. The letters were firm, professional, and apparently boring enough that the recipients actually read them instead of ignoring them. A few folks who'd been on the fence about partnering with Nathan quietly backed away and looped me in to confirm facts. I answered them honestly and succinctly. The contrast between my calm transparency and Nathan's half-truths did more damage than any shouting match could have. Next, I used the folder from the PI like a scalpel. There was no need to fling every damaging email at once. I rationed the evidence strategically. A carefully compiled dossier went to the compliance officer of a regional bank where Nathan had tried to open accounts using my name, and to an independent journalist I'd met at a conference months earlier, someone who covered small-scale fraud and family business dramas without the sensationalism that ruins careers. I didn't ask for a hit piece. I asked for accuracy and context. The journalist dug, asked questions, and when he came back with a list of corroborated facts, I allowed him to publish a measured piece. No hyperbole, just the truth laid bare. Examples of false claims, documented attempts to mislead investors, and the legal steps my team had taken to protect me. Watching that article go live felt less like revenge and more like cleaning up a house that had been full of smoke. People read it. People who mattered read it. Investors started reaching out, not because they wanted to gawk, but because they were concerned about their own exposure. That ripple effect was the second wave. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I secured the practical things. Accounts restructured, signature authorities reviewed, estate documents updated and hidden from the grubby reach of curious relatives. I transferred control of sensitive holdings into a trust structure that required more than a familial wink to access. I changed passwords, tightened two-factor authentication, and, this part felt deliciously petty, reclaimed domain names Nathan had squatted on that used my brand. All the while I kept my voice measured in public. I never posted screenshots or started a family group blow-up. I refused the drama. My silence was louder than anything they could manufacture. Their impatience showed in small ways. My aunt sending ever more desperate texts about finalizing arrangements. Nathan posting vague, smug updates that read like the last gasps of someone trying to look stable while the floor dropped out under him. They were so convinced they could bully me back into compliance that they didn't see the net I was weaving. Then I used my leverage with people who had previously been useful to them. I called in favors I'd earned, old colleagues who now sat on boards, a former mentor who had influence with a local tech incubator, a lawyer who owed me a favor from a deal years prior. I didn't ask them to stomp on my family. I asked them to simply be available, to corroborate facts, and to be ready should the situation require formal statements. Having respected, neutral third parties lined up made the move I planned look less like a vendetta and more like a series of responsible, documented responses. That was important because revenge that looks petty gets shrugged off. Revenge that looks like accountability sticks. The final piece was timing and the one thing you can't manufacture: surprise. I wanted to wait until Nathan was at his most exposed, when he had publicly leaned into the narrative that my money was his to use, when the family had convinced themselves the trust was inevitable, then pull a single, calm lever that would force them to confront reality all at once. I picked Thanksgiving again, not because I loved the symbolism, but because everyone would be there. The aunt who'd stitched her confidence from other people's success, the cousins who clustered like opportunists, my father who liked the theater of silence, and Nathan, who loved a crowd. I emailed a short note to my dad, my aunt, and Nathan 3 days before. A brief, surprisingly cordial invitation to coffee. The words were neutral. Let's talk in person about family and next steps. But the subtext was surgical. It baited them without screaming. On the morning I scheduled, I did something else that felt almost ceremonial. I printed a copy of the PI folder and placed it in a plain envelope. That physical object had a certain gravity that a folder on a server didn't. It was tactile proof of all the small, ugly things they'd done, and I wanted to watch what they would do when the paper hit the table. I also printed a separate, much shorter packet. Legal summaries, the journalist's article, emails confirming my security freezes, and kept that in my briefcase, ready to hand to any neutral party who asked for verification. When I arrived at the cafe, my hands were steady. I had rehearsed nothing. Rehearsing makes things feel like performances, and I wanted everything to feel like the truth. My dad was there first, already nursing a coffee he didn't touch. He looked older to me, smaller somehow, like the energy that used to fill him had leaked out. My aunt arrived breathless, with that practiced smile that had always been stadium bright and razor sharp at the same time. Nathan came last, late, like he was making an entrance, and he flopped into the chair across from me, a grin that tried too hard. We exchanged the expected small talk about weather and work. My voice didn't shake when I finally said what everyone already knew in some corner of their mind. I don't want the trust. I haven't signed anything, and I won't. My dad's face pinched. My aunt's smile thinned to a line of paper. Nathan's laugh, too loud, too strained, faded like a radio being turned down. Then, calmly, I slid the plain envelope across the table. No fanfare, just the soft whisper of paper on wood. I want you to read this, I said. It's everything I've collected over the last year about attempts to misrepresent my name, about claims that have been made to investors, and about your attempts to control my assets without my consent. My aunt's hand trembled as she took the envelope. Nathan started to protest, something about betrayal, about me ruining family, but I cut him off. You started this by assuming anything I had was up for grabs. You escalated it by lying to people who trusted me. You could have asked. You could have been honest. I heard a chair scrape. The cafe's clatter seemed to rush in after that. And then my father spoke, quiet, which made his words hit harder. Andy, we only wanted what was best for the family. I let that hang. Best for the family, I thought. And for whom exactly? For Nathan, who'd never written a check for anyone but himself. For my aunt, who thought motherhood granted license to rewrite a grown man's life. I waited as they read, eyes scanning, fingers tracing lines. I watched the color drain from Nathan's face. I watched my aunt's jaw clench like she was trying to hold words in. And then, just as the tension reached a point where it felt like the whole room might crack, my phone buzzed. A single email preview popped on the screen, subject line, urgent, request for verification, investor name. My heart thudded, but I kept my face neutral. The moment had arrived. The first of the dominoes I'd set in motion was tipping. I didn't have to yell or parade their misdeeds on social media. I didn't have to dole out humiliations. The evidence was out there now. The right people were asking the right questions. Legal notices were active. The banks had been informed. What I didn't expect, though, and what made my fingers go cold, was the look Nathan gave me then. Not fury, not sorrow, but a frantic, betrayed kind of calculation. He'd finally realized that this wasn't about begging or schmoozing. This was about real, irreversible consequences. He reached for his phone like a man clinging to a raft. My aunt's eyes met mine, not pleading but bargaining silently. Make it stop. I could have stopped. I could have folded the papers back into the envelope and returned to the life I'd had before, the one where I smiled at family photos and accepted their little digs. But years of walking with my head down had taught me a different lesson. When people show you who they are, believe them. I sat back and watched the first email open on my phone. The sender wanted confirmation that the investments Nathan had been pitching were not backed by me. They needed a statement. I could type a sentence and end a campaign of lies with one signature. I could also forward the journalist's contact and every corroborating document we'd compiled and let the story expand beyond anything my family could salvage with a spin. I spent a long, charged second deciding. Around us, other patrons were oblivious, students with laptops, a couple arguing about rent, the barista steaming milk. The ordinary life of the world churned on, which made the impending rupture feel both absurd and inevitable. Then Nathan spoke, very low, the kind of voice you use when trying to negotiate with a volcano. "Andy, please. Don't do this at Thanksgiving. Not like this. Give us a chance to." He didn't finish. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time a simple line from the journalist. "Sources confirm more. Need your go-ahead to publish full piece." The cafe air seemed to narrow. I looked at my father. I looked at my aunt. I looked at Nathan. I thought about the years I'd spent shrinking, about the nights of doubt, about the legal drafts on the table that had been slid across without my consent. I thought about the way they'd all laughed at my paperwork job when I was 20 and about how different the world looked now that I'd spent a decade building something real. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I could give them one last chance, an olive branch that would probably net me nothing and leave them free to try again. Or I could let the dossier speak, let neutral people read the facts, and allow events to unfold in daylight rather than in whispered deals behind closed doors. I inhaled, steady, the rain smell creeping through the cafe door, and hit send on the email that would confirm the journalist's request. The message left my outbox in a soft whoosh, and whatever music that had been playing in my head stopped. For a moment, a single, suspended heartbeat. I felt something like relief. Then my phone lit up with incoming replies. A terse thank you from the journalist, a curt note from the investor that they'd put Nathan's pitches on hold, and, finally, a string of texts in the family group chat that made my palms sweat. Frantic, accusatory, pleading, denial. Nathan looked at the glowing phone screen, then at me, and the expression he wore was not the spoiled boy I remembered, but someone tasting immediate, naked panic for the first time. He reached across the table as if to snatch the printed dossier back toward him, perhaps hoping to reframe or fabricate, but my hand was already on my briefcase. I wasn't going to be bullied into silence. I let him lunge and miss, and as his fingertips brushed empty air, the cafe seemed to tilt. Outside, a delivery truck rolled by, blowing a wet gust of wind that flapped napkins on nearby tables. Inside, my aunt pressed her lips together like someone expecting to be slapped. My father's hands had turned to fists. Nathan's phone screen reflected in his eyes, a little window of the life he'd tried to commandeer, and then his face hardened into something I barely recognized. He stood up abruptly, the chair screeching, almost knocking into a woman across the aisle. "This isn't over," he said, voice small but trying for menace, and before I could answer, he stormed out. My aunt followed, dragging her coat like armor. My father remained seated, hands on the table, looking older than I'd ever seen him, and for a second I thought I caught something almost like shame. The journalist sent another message. "Publishing tomorrow morning unless you advise otherwise." That simple line was the fuse. I felt the starting pistons of whatever would come next: court filings, media attention, family members called to account. I also felt, beneath it all, a quiet steadiness I'd earned, the knowledge that I had not lashed out in anger, but had instead used the rules of the world, law, journalism, contracts, to expose the truth. I walked out of the cafe into the wet afternoon and stood beneath a streetlight, watching Nathan's taillights disappear. My phone vibrated again, a message from my mother. 2 words, trembling with everything she'd never said aloud before. "Please, Andy." I read it, thumb hovering over the reply, and in that instant I knew that whatever happened after the article dropped would change everything. I also knew I couldn't unknow what I'd learned about them, and they couldn't unknow the truth that was about to be broadcast. The rain had turned into a steady downpour by the time I left the block. I tucked my head into my collar and started walking, Not toward the house where family waited and tension simmered, but away. I had set the dominoes in motion. Some would fall quickly, others would take time. I had done the math, pulled the strings, and prepared the papers. What I hadn't done was decide exactly how I would face them when the first story hit, whether I would sit at that Thanksgiving table and watch, or whether I would let them squirm from a distance while I rebuilt a life they tried to claim. My phone buzzed again, but this time the message was anonymous, and it read, "You just made a lot of enemies." I smiled without humor, because at that moment it felt like the truest compliment I'd ever received. Then my screen went dark as the battery icon winked red. I kept walking into the rain, and as I rounded the corner toward the subway, my mind ran through the steps in the sequence I'd rehearsed 100 times. The first article would publish at 9 a.m. The investors would put Nathan's proposals on hold. Banks and compliance teams would open inquiries. People who'd been complicit would try to distance themselves. And at some point, soon, the family would have to look at the consequences of what they had done and decide whether to beg, deny, or stand and take responsibility. I almost wanted to be there when that decision was made. I almost wanted to watch the theater of it all. But there was one final thing to do before the dominoes fully fell. A private conversation I had to have with one person who had the most to lose. A conversation that would determine whether remorse might still be possible, or whether the final curtain would drop on any chance of reconciliation. I paused on the steps of the station, rain streaming down my face, and sent one last text to a number I'd only ever used for emergencies. The message was simple: meet me tomorrow. Noon. Old Pier. Come alone. I hit send, slid the phone back into my pocket, and descended into the tunnel, the sound of the city above me muffled. The truth was loose now, and everything that followed would be the fallout. The article dropped the next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, just like the journalist promised. By 9:15, my phone was buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought I'd feel nervous, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, but instead, I felt calm. The piece was clean, factual, and devastating. It laid out the schemes Nathan had run, the lies he'd told, the reckless fraud he'd committed while invoking my name. It quoted compliance officers, included screenshots of his emails, and even mentioned that legal measures were already in motion. It didn't sensationalize. It didn't embellish. It just showed the truth, in black and white, for everyone to see. The fallout was immediate. By noon, Nathan's so-called business partners were cutting ties. Calls I didn't even know he had been making were suddenly rerouted to me. Investors scrambling to confirm what was real and what wasn't. I answered every one with the same line: I have no connection to his ventures. The documents speak for themselves. Calm, steady, undeniable. By 2 p.m., Nathan's social media accounts had gone dark. The smug posts, the vague boasts about big family-backed projects, all vanished. But screenshots circulated anyway. People laughed at how quickly he'd backpedaled. My inbox was full of links from acquaintances forwarding me threads where people were tearing him apart, investors calling him reckless, opportunists calling him exposed. And by evening, the calls from my family began. My aunt was first. She left a voicemail that swung wildly between anger and desperation. How could you do this to your own blood? You've humiliated us. You think strangers care about you more than your family? You've destroyed Nathan's future. Her voice cracked on the last line, and then, almost whispering, "Please, Andy, we can fix this. We can fix this." I didn't reply. My father called next. His message was quieter, heavier. "Son, this was too much. You didn't have to go this far." But then, in a pause so long I thought he'd hung up, he added, I should have handled this differently." That was the closest he'd ever come to admitting fault, and it still wasn't enough. For the first time, their words didn't pierce me. They felt small, distant, powerless. The next few days were chaos in the family orbit. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years texted me, some pretending to be supportive, others fishing for gossip. My mother called, sobbing, begging me to make peace. But there was no peace to be made. Not after they'd plotted to take everything from me, and not after they'd been exposed for exactly who they were. Nathan tried to fight back at first. He released a shaky video online, claiming the article was biased, that I had set him up, that he was the real victim of betrayal. But his eyes gave him away, wild, frantic, terrified. Within hours, comments shredded him to pieces. Receipts don't lie. Bro, You literally used his name in fake pitches. Own up, man. He deleted the video before the sun set. Meanwhile, I kept moving. My company thrived. My influence grew. People admired not the spectacle, but how calmly I'd handled it. No mudslinging, no theatrics, just letting the truth dismantle the lies. In an industry where credibility is everything, that mattered. The family, however, crumbled. Nathan lost his access to credit. Banks froze his accounts after the fraud attempts surfaced. His girlfriend left him, posting vague quotes about betrayal and realizing someone isn't who you thought they were. My aunt, once the loudest voice in every room, went quiet. Her friends stopped inviting her to brunch when her bragging turned into bitter complaints. And my father, he withdrew, avoiding me, avoiding everyone, retreating into a silence even heavier than before. I didn't celebrate their collapse. I didn't gloat, but I also didn't save them. They had written this story themselves. I had simply stopped erasing the ink. Months later, the holidays came again. I didn't attend the family dinner. Instead, I hosted my own gathering. Friends, colleagues, people who had supported me when my family tried to break me. Laughter filled my home, warm and real, no masks, no hidden agendas. At one point, I caught myself standing in the doorway, watching the glow of conversation and clinking glasses, and I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. That night, as the party wound down, I stepped out onto the balcony. Snow drifted in the quiet air, catching in the city lights. My phone buzzed once more, a message from an unknown number. It was from Nathan. Just 3 words. You ruined me. I stared at the screen, the snow falling soft around me. For a long moment, I considered replying. A dozen words rose in my throat. Defenses, explanations, even a touch of pity. But I deleted them all. Instead, I powered off the phone, slipped it into my pocket, and turned back inside, where real laughter waited. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't shrinking in anyone's shadow. I wasn't an asset, or a pawn, or the quiet cousin forgotten at the table. I was simply Andy, whole, steady, and free. And that was enough. I was sitting in the middle seat of a packed flight, halfway through a bag of pretzels, when I realized how pathetic the whole thing felt. 31 years old, flying home for Thanksgiving like some kid who still believes family reunions fix everything. My name's Logan, and I hadn't been back to my hometown in almost 3 years. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I tried, something always came up, usually in the form of my mother forgetting to tell me the date changed, or my sister Jenna planning something that only family was invited to, which apparently didn't include me. But this year felt different. Or at least, I wanted it to. I'd been working crazy hours at my tech job in Seattle and thought maybe actually showing up, would mean something. Maybe we'd laugh, eat too much pie, watch bad football, and pretend like the last few awkward years hadn't happened. So, I booked my ticket 2 weeks in advance, texted my mom the flight number, and even told her I'd pick up dessert. She texted back a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No can't wait to see you. No drive safe. Just a yellow thumb floating in digital silence. I should have known then. When I landed, I called her. No answer. Texted, nothing. Figured she was probably busy cooking, so I grabbed my rental car and started the hour drive from the airport. I even stopped at a bakery on the way to grab a pumpkin pie. It wasn't until I pulled into the driveway of our old house, that faded beige 2-story with the cracked mailbox that still read the Carters, that I felt something was off. No cars. No lights. No smells of turkey or cinnamon or anything remotely resembling family. I rang the doorbell anyway, more out of habit than hope. No answer. I tried the handle, locked. I called again. Straight to voicemail. Hey mom, it's me. I just got here. Where is everyone? My voice cracked a little, and I hated that it did. I left the pie on the porch, just in case, and drove around the block thinking maybe they'd moved and forgot to tell me. But their cars were nowhere. The whole neighborhood was quiet, the kind of stillness that hits you in the chest. I ended up sitting in a parking lot for nearly an hour, scrolling through my phone like an idiot, waiting for someone to text me back. Nobody did. Finally, I caved and called Jenna. She picked up after 2 rings. Logan, why are you calling? Her tone wasn't annoyed. Exactly. More confused, like I'd interrupted something. Because I'm at mom's house for Thanksgiving. Where are you guys? She went quiet. I could hear voices in the background, faint laughter, clinking silverware. Oh, right. We decided to do it at my place this year. Didn't Mom tell you? No, she didn't, I said slowly. I just flew all the way here. Well, we figured you probably wouldn't come, she said. You're always busy with work and all that. I literally told Mom I was coming. Yeah, well, it's kinda late now. We already ate. That one hit harder than I expected. I could picture them all sitting around Jenna's oversized dining table. Mom, Dad, my brother Mason, maybe even a couple of cousins, laughing and talking like I never existed. You could have texted, I said. Just once. She sighed like I was being dramatic. Logan, don't make this a big thing, okay? We'll see you at Christmas. I hung up before she could say anything else. The next 2 days, not one person called. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Mason. I stayed in a cheap motel off the highway, watched reruns of shows I didn't like, and tried to convince myself it didn't matter. But it did. It really did. Because it wasn't just about being left out. It was about being forgotten. Then, on the third morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Hey, sweetie. Quick question. Jenna's baby shower is next month. It's $500 per person for the venue, catering, and decorations. You're paying, right? I just stared at the screen. No, sorry about Thanksgiving. No explanation, not even a how are you. Just a demand for money like the past few days hadn't happened. I actually laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that sounds a little unhinged. I texted back, $500? For what? A royal wedding. She replied instantly, don't start. It's your sister's special day. Everyone's contributing. Family supports family, Logan. That phrase, family supports family, was her favorite line, the same one she used when I was younger and she borrowed from my savings for Mason's first car, or when she guilt me into covering their mortgage 1 month, until Dad's bonus came through. I used to think it meant something deep about loyalty. Now, it just felt like code for we take, you give. So, I opened my banking app, sent her exactly 50 cents, and added a note. Good luck. 2 hours later, my phone blew up. First a call from Mom, then Jenna, then a group text titled Family Red Heart. The messages came flying in. Are you serious right now? Don't be petty, Logan. Mom's crying. You're so ungrateful. I didn't reply to any of them. I just muted the chat and went for a walk. That night, around 11 p.m., I got an email from my bank. Someone had tried to access the joint account I used to share with Mom years ago, the one I'd left open for emergencies. My stomach turned. When I logged in, I saw pending transfers, small amounts at first, but clearly testing the waters. Then another notification popped up. Mason had tried to use the shared family card for a $700 baby shower deposit. That's when something in me snapped. Years of being overlooked, used, and treated like a walking ATM hit all at once. I sat there, staring at the screen, and started closing every shared account, the old savings, the family card, even the streaming services I'd been paying for since college. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. Cold, calm, overdue clarity. By the time I was done, the only thing left connected to them was my phone number, and even that felt temporary. I shut my laptop, turned off my phone, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my door. Not a knock, pounding. Logan, open the door right now. It was Mason. His voice was muffled but furious. I know you're in there. I froze. He wasn't supposed to even know where I was staying. Then I remembered. I'd left my location on in the family group chat before muting it. He pounded again, harder this time. You think you can just cut us off like that? You owe us an explanation. I took a slow breath, heart racing. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was about control, and I'd just taken it away from them. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there, barefoot on the cold motel carpet, staring at it like it might start talking back. Mason's voice was sharp, the kind of anger that comes from entitlement, not hurt. He wasn't mad that I'd shut him out. He was mad that I'd finally stopped letting him in for free. Logan, he barked again, followed by a thud so loud the cheap wall art rattled. I know you hear me. I finally cracked the door open a few inches, just enough to see him. Same face, same smug grin I'd grown up with. Except now he looked tired, maybe desperate. You shouldn't be here, I said. Yeah, well, Mom's freaking out. You froze her card. She couldn't even pay for gas last night. What's your problem? My problem. I repeated, half laughing. You mean my money, Mason, you guys have been using my accounts like they're family property. Because they are, he snapped. You've always said you'd help if anyone needed it. Mom counted on that. Now suddenly you're some big shot who's too good for his own family. I opened the door fully and crossed my arms. I'm the one who's been paying for everyone else's emergencies since I was 21. How many times has anyone paid me back? He frowned. That's not the point. Yeah, I said quietly. It never is when you're the one taking. He glared at me, shifting his weight like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. You humiliated Mom with that 50-cent thing. She cried all night. Jenna was the one who called me. She's pregnant, by the way. Maybe show some respect. I know she's pregnant. And if you think I'm paying $500 for a baby shower I wasn't even invited to, you've lost it. Mason's face twisted. You don't understand what Mom's going through. She's stressed. Dad's been quiet lately. Jenna's hormonal. And you? And me what? Working? Paying my own bills? Not begging people for money. He exhaled hard. You've always thought you were better than the rest of us. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because that's how they always saw me. Not as someone who worked hard, but as someone who thought he was above them for doing it. When he finally left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door again. My hands were shaking. I wasn't angry so much as numb, like I'd hit a wall I'd been running toward for years without realizing it. I remembered being 17, getting my first job at a grocery store, saving every dollar because Mom had said, "We're all struggling right now, Logan, but once things get better, we'll pay you back." I believed her. I always believed her. And somehow, 20 years later, nothing had changed, except now I was the one keeping the whole show running. Later that afternoon, I drove back to town for some air. It was cold, gray, that weird November mix of half rain, half snow. My phone started buzzing again, Mom this time. I let it go to voicemail. Then another text came in. You've really disappointed me, Logan. Family doesn't turn on each other like this. I almost laughed. Family doesn't turn on each other. Unless, apparently, it's convenient. I didn't answer. But a few hours later, when I stopped at a coffee shop, I saw Jenna had posted something on Facebook. A picture of her holding her baby bump, surrounded by pastel balloons and cupcakes. The caption read, "Can't wait for my special day. Two Hearts family means everything. #blessed, #grateful." And right below it, a comment from Mom. So proud of my beautiful daughter. You deserve the world. Some people forget where they came from. That line, that last one, it was aimed straight at me, and she knew it. The thing about family manipulation is it's rarely loud. It's quiet, passive-aggressive, sugar-coated with phrases like, "We love you," but, or "You've changed." My mom had perfected it years ago. She'd guilt you with a smile, make you feel like doing what's right was somehow cruel. I tried calling Dad that night, hoping maybe he'd see things differently. He picked up after a few rings, his voice tired. "Hey, son." "Hey, Dad. Look, I'm trying to understand what's going on here. Why is everyone acting like I committed a crime for not paying for Jenna's party?" He sighed. "You know how your mom is. She just wants everything perfect for your sister. It's her first baby, after all. And what about Thanksgiving? Nobody even told me it wasn't at the house." There was a pause. That was a miscommunication." "Miscommunication?" I said, voice tightening. "I sat outside an empty house for an hour, Dad. Nobody even texted me." "I told your mother to call you," he said softly. "So it's my fault again?" "No, I didn't say that." I could tell he was tired, not physically, but emotionally. My dad had been beaten down by years of keeping the peace. He was a quiet man who believed avoiding conflict was the same as resolving it. It wasn't. It just let people like my mom and Jenna run the show. "Dad," I said finally, "I can't keep doing this. Every time I help, it turns into more. And when I stop, I'm the villain." He didn't answer for a few seconds. "Just talk to your mother, okay? She loves you." That was the end of it. I hung up feeling like I'd just been told to apologize for existing. The next morning, Mom texted again. "We're coming over to talk this out." I didn't respond, but 3 hours later, there was a knock, softer than Mason's, but somehow heavier. When I opened the door, there she was. Same neat hair, same perfume she'd worn since I was a kid. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, sweetheart." "Mom," I said flatly. "Can we come in?" She glanced over her shoulder. Jenna was behind her, bundled up in a white coat, one hand resting dramatically on her belly. I hesitated, but stepped aside. The moment they were inside, Mom started scanning the motel room like it was beneath her. You're still staying here? I thought you'd go to a nicer place. I'm not here for vacation. She set her purse down and folded her arms. Logan, this has gone too far. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you can't just cut off the family like that. Mom, I didn't cut anyone off. I stopped being used. Jenna rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You act like we're all stealing from you. You are stealing from me, I said. The accounts were supposed to be for emergencies, not baby showers, not gas money, not fancy restaurants. Mom's smile faltered. We're family. Family shares. Then why didn't family share Thanksgiving with me? That shut her up. For a moment. Then she said quietly, you know how your sister gets when she's planning things. It wasn't personal. It always is. Jenna scoffed. You're just mad you weren't the center of attention for once. That one hit hard. You think this is about attention? I'm just tired of being the only one who gives anything in this family. Mom's eyes hardened. Logan, you've always been dramatic. You make everything about money. Do you even realize how cold that makes you sound? Cold. That word stuck to me like tar. I'd spent years helping them out, covering bills, buying gifts, sending money, and somehow, when I stopped, I was the cold one. Mom, I said, voice low, I flew across the country to see you. You couldn't even text me where dinner was. That's not an accident. That's a message. She looked away. You're twisting things. No, I said, stepping closer. I'm finally seeing things clearly. For a second, something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You always overthink everything. Just send the money, and we'll forget this happened. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You really think that's how this works? Don't be cruel, Logan, she said. Your sister's been through enough. I turned to Jenna. You could have called. You could have told me about Thanksgiving. You could have invited me to your baby shower like a normal person. But instead, I get a bill. Her jaw tightened. I didn't think you'd care. You never come home anyway. Maybe because every time I do, it feels like I'm not wanted. Mom snapped her purse shut and stood up. Fine. If that's how you feel, then I don't know what else to say. But remember this, Logan, family always comes first. Always. She said it like a threat. Then she walked out, Jenna trailing behind her. The silence that followed felt heavy. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, the soft creak of the motel heater kicking on. My chest felt hollow. I thought that was the end of it, that they'd storm off and leave me alone. But that night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of my childhood home, lights blazing inside, with the caption, "You'll regret what you did today." I stared at it for a long time, the glow from my phone reflecting off the window. And for the first time, I realized they weren't just angry. They were planning something. Something big. The text didn't come from a random number. Not really. I zoomed in on the photo, and though the number was unsaved, something about the angle, the porch light's reflection, and the timestamp made my stomach drop. Only one person still had that angle from their driveway camera. Mason. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was some weird attempt to guilt trip me. But deep down, I knew my family didn't send idle messages. Every word, every post, every guilt-soaked text had an intent to pull me back in. And this time, something about "you'll regret what you did today" didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like a warning. I barely slept that night. I sat upright in bed, lights on, staring at my phone. A part of me hoped I'd wake up and realize it was all some exaggerated misunderstanding, that maybe they'd cool off, that this wouldn't turn into something uglier. But when morning came, I woke to a notification that made my heart drop straight through the mattress. My bank had locked my account. I sat there blinking, reloading the screen over and over. Your access is temporarily restricted due to suspicious activity. I grabbed my laptop, tried logging in from there, and got the same message. My checking, savings, business account, everything. Even my secondary card. I called the bank. After 20 minutes on hold, a representative came on. "Yes, Mr. Carter, we flagged your account due to multiple failed password attempts from different devices. One of them was from your hometown." I froze. "What? I didn't log in from there." "That's what we figured," she said. "Luckily, none of the attempts succeeded, but we locked access just in case. We'll need you to come in with identification to restore access." I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. There was no way that was a coincidence. Someone had tried to get into my accounts, and it had to be family. I could almost see them in my head, sitting around the kitchen table, plotting like it was a family project. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. Because no matter how toxic they'd been, a part of me still believed there were lines they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. An hour later, my phone started buzzing again. This time it was Dad. "Logan," he said when I picked up, his tone quiet but sharp. "What's going on with the accounts?" I almost laughed. "You too. Your mother said her card stopped working. She was at the grocery store, and because it's my card, Dad. It was never hers." He sighed. "You could have told us before shutting everything down. Would it have changed anything?" A long silence followed. Then he said, softer now, "You know your mother doesn't mean to hurt you. She just doesn't always think. Dad, she planned Thanksgiving without me. She texted me asking for $500 2 days later. Then someone tried to break into my accounts from her house. That's not thoughtlessness. That's intentional." I heard something rustle in the background. Mom's voice, faint but distinct. "Give me the phone." "No," Dad said quietly. Then I heard her shout, "Logan, we just wanted what's fair. You owe this family for everything we did for you growing up." There it was again. That word. "Oh." I took a deep breath. "You think I owe you because you were my parents? You wouldn't be where you are without us," she said sharply. "You never help out. You act like you're above everyone. And now you're turning your back when we need you most." "When you need me most," I corrected. "You're twisting everything as usual." "Mom, did you try to log into my accounts?" Silence. "Mom," she finally said, in that voice she used when she thought she was being calm and reasonable. "We just needed to check something. You've got money sitting there doing nothing while your sister's struggling. We thought." I actually dropped the phone. Not from shock, from the surge of anger that made my hand shake. I picked it back up slowly. "You thought you could just take it?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, her voice rising. "It's not stealing when it's family." "Yeah," I said, almost whispering, "it is." I hung up before she could respond. I didn't want to hear the justifications, the fake apologies, the tone shifts that always made me second-guess myself. I'd been manipulated enough times to recognize the pattern. Guilt, deflection, affection, attack, repeat. But this time, the guilt didn't work. It was gone. That evening, I drove back toward my childhood neighborhood, not because I wanted to see them, but because I needed to see the house one more time. Needed to remind myself why I'd built my own life far away from it. The street looked the same, but the feeling was different. When I slowed past the house, the lights were blazing. Through the living room window, I could see movement. Mom pacing, Jenna on the couch, Mason standing near the fireplace. A family meeting. Probably about me. I parked a few houses down and watched for a minute, just long enough to see Mom pick up her phone and hold it to her ear. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. I didn't answer. She called again. Then Jenna texted, "You're being ridiculous. We're family. Come talk like an adult." The same family that didn't bother inviting me to Thanksgiving now wanted to talk. I left. That night, I checked my email before bed and found something that almost made me laugh out loud, though it wasn't funny. An invoice from a local event company. Carter family baby shower deposit. Remaining balance, $3,200. At the bottom, under bill to, was my name. They'd actually put it in my name. I called the company first thing in the morning. A polite woman answered. "Hi, this is Logan Carter," I said. "I got an invoice for a baby shower I didn't book." "Oh yes, that's for Jenna Carter's event," she said cheerfully. "Your mother gave us your details. She said you'd be covering the payment." I gripped the phone so tightly it hurt. "Did she sign anything?" "Yes. She filled out the form and wrote your name in the payment section. Since the card didn't go through, we sent the invoice to you." I closed my eyes. My own mother had committed fraud, family fraud, I guess. "Thank you," I said stiffly. "You'll want to cancel that contract immediately." "Oh, we can't cancel without the client's consent." "I'm the client," I said sharply. "Not her. And if you process that payment, you'll be hearing from my lawyer." That got her attention. She promised to pause everything until further clarification. By then, I wasn't even angry, just exhausted. I'd reached that quiet stage of betrayal where the emotion burns out and what's left is clarity. And clarity hurt worse. Because for the first time, I realized it wasn't just about money. It was about control. My mom had always wanted to remind me that no matter how successful I became, she could still pull strings, still make me small, still make me need her. I thought about all the years she'd played the same games, how she'd cry when I said no, how she'd guilt me with lines like, "You're not the same sweet boy who used to share everything with his sister," or how she'd brag about me to her friends, then mock me behind my back for thinking I'm smarter than everyone. But using my name on a financial document? That crossed a line so deep it might as well have been carved in stone. I forwarded the invoice to my attorney. Not because I wanted to sue my family. I wasn't even sure I had the stomach for that yet, but because I wanted documentation. Proof. 2 days passed. I didn't answer any of their calls. Then, on the third day, Mason showed up again. This time not at the motel, but at my apartment complex in Seattle. He must have used the address I'd left on an old form for Dad. When I saw him through the peephole, my chest tightened. He looked rough, eyes bloodshot, jaw tense, wearing that same worn-out leather jacket he always thought made him look tougher than he was. He started banging on the door. "Open up, Logan. We need to talk." I didn't move. "I know about the baby shower thing," he shouted. "You didn't have to make it legal, man. You're gonna ruin everything." I stayed quiet. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "You think you're safe? You don't even know what Mom's planning." That got me to unlock the door, just enough to look him in the eye. "What's that supposed to mean?" He hesitated, eyes darting. "She's talking to a lawyer. Something about the house. About repayment." "Repayment?" I repeated. "Yeah. She said you owe the family for what Dad gave you for college. She wants to take you to small claims or something." I told her it's crazy, but she's serious. I just stood there, speechless. Mason rubbed his face. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. You made her mad, Logan. Real mad. And when Mom's mad, she doesn't stop until she wins." He turned to leave, but before he did, he added, "You might want to check your credit, bro." The door shut, and for a long moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I pulled out my laptop, logged into my credit account, and there it was, 2 new inquiries. One for a department store card, one for a personal loan application, both under my name, both filed within the last 48 hours, and both from my hometown. That was the exact moment I stopped seeing this as family drama and started seeing it as war. For the next few days, I moved through life like a ghost. Everything looked normal on the surface. Same morning coffee, same work emails, same quiet walks around the block. But inside, it felt like something fundamental had cracked. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was this dull, aching clarity that came from finally seeing people for who they really were. When I checked my credit again that night, there were 3 more applications. 1 denied, 2 still pending. It was like watching termites eat through a foundation I'd spent my whole adult life building. I called the credit bureau, froze everything, and spent nearly an hour confirming I hadn't applied for anything. Then I called my lawyer, Adam, a friend from college who handled corporate cases but owed me a few favors. When I explained what was going on, there was this pause. Then he said, "Logan, you're telling me your own mother opened credit lines in your name?" "Pretty much," I said, "or at least tried to." He sighed. "Okay, you need to start documenting everything. Every text, every call, every failed login attempt. Get printouts from your bank, too. Don't delete a single message." "I already started," I said quietly. "Good. Because if she keeps this up, you'll have grounds for identity theft charges." Hearing those words, identity theft, hit me harder than I expected. It made it real. Not just family dysfunction. Not bad communication or hurt feelings. A crime. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, just staring at my phone. I could have blocked them all right then. Could have erased every trace of them from my life. But something stopped me. Not forgiveness. Just the habit of still hoping they'd change. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls. Most from Mom, some from Jenna, and a few from an unknown number I'd bet good money was Mason borrowing someone's phone. The voicemail notifications kept coming until the box filled up. I didn't listen. I couldn't. Then came the text that broke me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was simple, quiet, and cruel. "You've always been the selfish one, Logan. Even as a kid, I should have known you'd turn out like this." No punctuation. No heart emoji. Just that. I don't know what made that message sting more than all the others. Maybe because it was the one that sounded honest, not in a good way, but in a way that revealed what she'd always thought of me deep down. That I wasn't a son. I was a resource. And when that resource dried up, I became the villain. That night, I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days, and drove. No plan, no destination. Just the road and a heavy silence that made me feel like I was floating outside my own life. I ended up near the coast, hours away from everything familiar. I checked into a quiet Airbnb above a seafood restaurant. The host barely spoke English, which suited me fine. The ocean air helped clear my head. I walked along the shore until my shoes filled with sand, my phone buried deep in my jacket pocket, turned off. For the first time in weeks, I didn't hear it buzzing. It's funny how stillness hurts at first. You think you crave peace, but when you finally get it, you're forced to hear your own thoughts, all the ones you've been drowning out. I thought about growing up in that house, about the way Mom used to say, family takes care of each other, every time I brought home a paycheck from my teenage job, about Mason wrecking my first car and Mom telling me, "It's just a car, Logan, don't make it about money." About Jenna getting a brand new MacBook for graduation while mine was fine for now. I thought about how, at 24, when Dad's hours were cut, I wired $4,000 to help them catch up on bills, and how not one person said thank you. And how, when I finally moved across the country for my job, Mom told me, "Don't forget where you came from," like leaving was betrayal instead of survival. Somewhere between the crashing waves and the cold wind, it hit me that I'd spent my entire life auditioning for a family that never actually wanted me. At least, not unless they could get something out of it. The realization didn't feel freeing. It felt heavy, but heavy in a final way, like setting down a box you've been carrying so long you forgot what your arms felt like without it. I stayed in that small coastal town for a few days. Woke up late, walked along the docks, ate cheap clam chowder, and avoided thinking too much. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not friends, not coworkers, not even my landlord. I needed to disappear, at least for a while. On the third night, my phone lit up while I was brushing my teeth. Unknown number again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Logan." It was Dad. His voice sounded strained, older somehow. "Dad," I said carefully. "What's going on?" There was a long pause. "Your mother's not doing well. She says you're trying to destroy the family." I closed my eyes. "Dad, she tried to open credit cards in my name." He didn't respond. I could hear the faint buzz of the TV in the background, probably tuned to some daytime talk show Mom liked. "I don't know what to say," he murmured finally. "You know how she gets when she's upset. Maybe if you just apologize." Apologize? For what? For whatever she thinks you did. I almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound. "Dad, do you even hear yourself? She's breaking the law, and you're asking me to apologize?" He sighed. "You don't understand. She's your mother." "Yeah," I said softly. "And I wish that meant something." We hung up without saying goodbye. After that, something inside me went quiet. Not numb this time, but still. Like a switch had flipped. The part of me that kept reaching back, that kept hoping they'd meet me halfway, just stopped. That's when I started planning. Not revenge, not yet. Just control. The first step was protection. I called Adam again and told him I wanted to officially separate my financial identity from my family's in every way possible. He drew up some documents, got me to sign a few forms, and helped me close the last remaining shared assets my parents had access to. Next, I updated every password, switched to two-factor authentication, and froze my credit indefinitely. I even changed my phone number. It felt paranoid at first, but after everything, I wasn't taking chances. Then came the part I'd been avoiding, writing down everything. Every incident, every message, every time they'd used me or humiliated me. It started as a list, short, clinical, but as the days went by, it turned into pages, then paragraphs, then a whole document. Reading it back was surreal. Seeing it all laid out like that, years of small manipulations, guilt trips, and family favors, made it impossible to pretend it wasn't a pattern. It wasn't random. It was systematic. By the end of that week, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not for Christmas. Not for Jenna's baby shower. Not ever, maybe. I'd had enough. But walking away wasn't as clean as it sounds. The guilt still crept in sometimes. That voice in my head saying, "What if they're right? What if you really are selfish?" I'd sit by the window, staring out at the ocean, thinking about how much easier life would be if I could just not care. But the truth is, even when you walk away from toxic family, the emotional leash takes time to snap. On my 5th day at the coast, I got one last text before turning my phone off completely. It was from Mason. Mom says she's done trying. Don't bother coming back. No threats. No drama. Just finality. And for some reason, that hurt more than anything else. Because even though I'd already decided to walk away, hearing it from them, that they were done, made it feel like I'd been exiled from something that was supposed to be unbreakable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there listening to the wind and the waves, thinking about how families are supposed to be a safety net. Mine had become a trap instead. Still, under all that pain, there was something else stirring. A faint ember of determination. Maybe even purpose. They thought cutting me off emotionally was punishment. They thought I'd come crawling back like always. But they'd underestimated just how much I'd already lost, and how far I was willing to go now that I had nothing left to protect but myself. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I quietly started building the plan that would change everything. And when it was over, they'd finally understand what it felt like to lose something that couldn't be bought back. The morning after that last text from Mason, I woke up before sunrise. For once, I wasn't weighed down by dread. The coastal air felt sharper, cleaner. I watched the ocean turn gold with the light, and something inside me shifted. Maybe it was peace, maybe it was resolve, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen in that limbo between anger and guilt anymore. I drove back to Seattle that day with a single goal in mind: to rebuild, not just financially, but personally. I wanted to make my life so solid that no one could ever reach in and shake it again. When I pulled into my apartment complex, everything felt strangely new, like I was stepping into my own life for the first time. The guilt was still there, faint and lingering, but I finally saw it for what it was: a leash they'd tied around my neck years ago. And I was done being led by it. My first move was practical. I got a new number, changed my email, replaced every card, and upgraded all my accounts to business tier security. Then I called Adam again and told him I wanted to take things further, legally, this time. He helped me draft a formal identity theft report, and I filed it with the local authorities. Not because I expected them to arrest my mom or anything. Honestly, I doubted it would even go that far, but because I wanted it documented. A line in the sand. After that, I started focusing on work again. For years, I'd been floating, good at what I did, but never really pushing myself. I'd always been too distracted by family drama, guilt, and obligations that didn't belong to me. But now I had silence, space, focus, and I didn't waste it. I'm a software consultant, not glamorous, but I built a decent reputation over the years helping startups with infrastructure and back-end systems. I had a small network of loyal clients and a portfolio that quietly paid my bills. But that December, I took a risk. I decided to start my own company. I named it North Node Systems, a quiet nod to the direction I wanted my life to go forward. At first, it was just me in a small co-working space downtown. But I was working like a man possessed. 12-hour days didn't feel exhausting anymore. They felt purposeful. I poured all the pain and bitterness I'd been carrying into the grind. Every late night wasn't just about success. It was about reclaiming control. About proving, if only to myself, that I could stand completely on my own. I learned everything I could about business structure, taxes, incorporation, and automation. I networked aggressively. I started taking on bigger clients, corporations that needed serious back-end support, and word spread fast. Within 6 months, I had enough contracts to hire 2 part-time developers. By month 8, we were profitable. Somewhere in the middle of that growth, I realized I wasn't thinking about my family anymore. Not in the old way, at least. I wasn't checking for texts or scrolling social media to see what Jenna posted. I didn't flinch when the holidays came and went without a single message. Instead, I spent Christmas skiing with coworkers and New Year's at a rooftop party in the city. It was weird at first, celebrating without them, but also liberating. I laughed more that winter than I had in years. And when tax season rolled around, I hired a professional accountant, a real one, not my dad's friend from church like before. When she saw the old shared records, she raised an eyebrow. "You had your family tied into this." "Not anymore," I said. She smiled. "Good. Keep it that way." By the time spring came, my company had landed a major client, a logistics firm out of Chicago. That deal changed everything. It wasn't just money, it was legitimacy. Suddenly, I wasn't some freelance guy from Seattle. I was a founder. The kind of person my family used to say I thought I was better than everyone for wanting to become. I rented a real office downtown, glass walls, modern furniture, a big whiteboard with my goals written in permanent marker. The first day I walked in there with my small team, I couldn't stop grinning. And then, one morning, as I was leaving the office, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something in me said to answer. Hello. Hi. This is Patricia from Evergreen Financial. I'm calling to confirm the address for your new business account. For a second, I didn't understand. My what? Your business line of credit, she said. Applied under North Node Systems. I froze. I didn't apply for that. She hesitated. Oh, that's strange. The application had your full name, EIN, and company information. But the listed contact number was different. Can you send me the documentation? She did. And when I opened it, my chest went tight. The signature line said Logan Carter, but the email domain used was northnodeconsultingfamily@gmail.com. There was only one person who would think that kind of name sounded legitimate. Mom. It was almost impressive in a way. She'd found a new angle, not my personal finances this time, but my company. I'd spent months clawing my way to independence, and she was still trying to find a way to drag me back down. But instead of breaking me, it made me colder, sharper. I called Adam again, sent him the document, and he practically whistled. She's escalating, he said. You could sue her for damages now. I don't want to sue her, I said quietly. Not yet. Then what do you want to do? I want her to stop thinking I'm still the same kid she can guilt into cleaning up her messes. And that's when the idea started forming. I spent the next few weeks preparing, not out of revenge, not even yet, but to protect myself and, frankly, to send a message. I opened new accounts under the company's LLC, completely separate from my personal identity. I moved my office lease into the business's name, upgraded security systems, and registered trademarks for my logo and company name. By summer, we'd expanded into a team of 8. I'd hired 2 developers full-time, a project manager, and even an intern from UW who reminded me a lot of myself. Quiet, serious, maybe a little too eager to prove himself. I started mentoring him, something I never thought I'd enjoy. But teaching someone who genuinely wanted to learn was the exact opposite of trying to please people who only took. It was refreshing. And then came the moment that really made me realize how far I'd come. It was late July, a Thursday evening, and I was sitting in my office going through invoices when I got an email with the subject line, Family Reunion 2025. It was from Jenna. I don't know what made me click it. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Inside was a flyer, a bright, pastel design advertising a summer family gathering at some rented lake house. In the fine print, I saw the words, all expenses covered by Logan. I actually laughed out loud. Not the angry kind of laugh, the genuine disbelief kind. Below the flyer was a message. Hey Logan, we figured this would be a great time to make things right. Mom says you've been doing really well, so we knew you wouldn't mind helping cover the cost. It's not much, just around $3,000 total. Let's heal as a family. They hadn't changed, not even a little. But the difference was, this time, I had power. Real, tangible power. They couldn't touch my accounts, couldn't guilt me, couldn't manipulate me. The leash was gone. So instead of replying, I did something I'd never done before. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a single line, add this to the file. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and felt a strange calm wash over me. My life wasn't perfect. I still had scars, some emotional, some financial, but I'd built something that no one could take away. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. That summer was the best of my life. The company doubled in size. I bought my first house, a small modern place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Not flashy, but clean, quiet mine. I started working out, learned to cook, made new friends who didn't know or care about my family drama. And when my accountant emailed me one day with my projected earnings for the year, I stared at the number for a long time. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was what it represented. Independence. Still, I couldn't help wondering what they'd say if they saw it. If they knew the kid they'd ignored at Thanksgiving had built something real, something untouchable. But I didn't have to wonder for long. Because in late August, right after closing a major contract, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled in my mother's familiar handwriting. I stood there in my office, holding it, the air thick with that old mix of dread and curiosity. Part of me wanted to throw it straight in the trash. But another part, the part that still remembered the little boy who used to wait for her approval, wanted to know. So I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Neat handwriting. Formal. Almost cold. Logan, I heard about your business. Congratulations. I hope you'll remember who supported you through all those years of school and sacrifice. We're planning something important for the family. We'll talk soon. There was no apology. No warmth. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just entitlement wrapped in politeness. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on my desk. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because if there was one thing I knew about my family, it was this. They only reached out when they wanted something. And this time, I had the feeling they wanted something big. I didn't touch the letter for 3 days. I kept it on my desk, right next to my monitor, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A reminder of how easy it would be to slip back into their orbit if I let emotion cloud judgment. Every time I glanced at that neat, practiced handwriting, the part of me that once wanted peace warred with the part that now demanded justice. But then something happened that made the decision for me. It started with a phone call from my accountant, a woman named Nora who had saved me more than once from my own disorganization. Logan, she said carefully, did you authorize a tax inquiry from an external party? I frowned. No. Why? Because someone tried to access your IRS records using your social security number. They claimed to be a family representative for your business. I didn't even have to ask who. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. The letter, the new family event, the timing, it all fit together too neatly. Mom wasn't congratulating me. She was positioning herself. She wanted proof of success, enough to justify whatever she was planning to claim next. So, I stopped waiting to react. I started to prepare. I reached out to Adam again, this time with a different tone. I want to protect every piece of what I've built, legally, financially, and publicly. He smiled through the phone. You're ready to play chess now, not checkers. We spent the next 2 months quietly putting up walls. Every asset I owned, the house, the car, the company, was placed under an LLC and trust structure. My salary was rerouted through a management entity, so my personal income looked modest on paper. I even hired a PR consultant to polish my company's image, making Northnode look like a community-driven tech firm rather than a cash machine. By October, I was practically invisible on paper. And then, by what I can only call poetic timing, my sister Jenna posted a video on Facebook. It was one of those cheerful vlogs, a montage of her new life as a mom. She'd had the baby a few months earlier, and the video showed pastel nurseries, slow-motion laughter, and, near the end, a quick clip of her mother sitting at a dining table, smiling proudly while saying, "We're so blessed, especially now that Logan's finally giving back to the family." It had over 2,000 views. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words echoing. Giving back to the family. Not only was it untrue, but it was deliberate. It painted a picture of me as the generous provider, which, I realized, they were using to justify whatever financial narrative they'd been spinning behind closed doors. So, I made a call to someone who could help me pull a different kind of lever, an old client of mine who now worked in cybersecurity for a private firm. I'll call him Nate. Think you can trace where a certain set of loan applications came from? I asked. He chuckled. If you've still got the paperwork, I can find the digital footprints in a day. 2 days later, I had the report. Every fraudulent application, every fake email domain, every IP address, all leading back to my parents' home network. One of them was even timestamped during Jenna's video upload. That was it. No more hesitation. I wasn't going to press charges. Not yet. There were cleaner ways to make people like that understand consequences. So, I crafted a plan, quiet, methodical, untraceable in spirit, but legal in every sense. Step 1. I reached out to the event venue that had nearly charged me for the baby shower months before. The owner, a woman named Claire, remembered me instantly. "Oh, you're that family," she said dryly. "Your mother was persistent." I laughed. That's one way to put it. "Listen, would you mind sending me the deposit paperwork she signed last year? I need it for a legal review." She obliged. And when I looked at it, I saw exactly what I needed. Mom's full signature next to a payment authorization line that listed my name and business. That was fraud, plain and simple. Step 2. I drafted a polite letter. Dear Mother, I recently became aware of several financial documents bearing my name without authorization. As a courtesy, I am providing you an opportunity to retract any claims, statements, or representations regarding my involvement in family finances or events. Failure to do so will result in legal escalation. Warm regards, Logan. I sent it certified mail. And because I knew how she worked, I expected exactly what happened next. Silence followed by rage. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Mason. Nice move. Mom's furious. You think you can scare us? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because, by then, the third step was already underway. See, part of running a company means building relationships, accountants, lawyers, even journalists. So, I reached out to a small but reputable business magazine that often profiled local founders. I pitched them a story about escaping financial manipulation to build independent success. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. But I told the truth, every word of it. The article went live in late November. It was titled, How One Man Cut Financial Ties to Survive and Thrive. It blew up. Thousands of shares, dozens of comments. And within a day, people from my hometown were connecting the dots. It wasn't hard. Same last name, same small-town roots. By the time Mom called, she wasn't even pretending to be polite. How dare you humiliate us like this? She hissed through the phone. Everyone knows who you're talking about. I took a deep breath. Maybe if it didn't sound familiar, you wouldn't be so upset. You think you're better than us, she shouted. You think that money makes you untouchable? No, I said quietly. But boundaries do. And then I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her directly. The fallout was fast. People in town started whispering. Old friends stopped calling her for donations or favors. Jenna's little influencer channel went dark after she started getting comments like, "Guess your brother finally wised up, huh?" But I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. Revenge, I realized, isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet, like watching a tower you didn't build finally crumble under its own weight. Still, I wasn't done. The final touch came a month later. My company had grown large enough that we started a philanthropic branch, small grants for tech education and scholarships for underprivileged students. I decided to name the scholarship fund after my late grandmother, the only person in my family who ever treated me with kindness. When the press release went public, one journalist asked why I chose that name. I smiled and said, because she taught me that love doesn't come with a bill attached. That line made headlines. And when I saw the quote circulating online, reposted by hundreds of people, tagged under #NorthNode, I knew the message had reached exactly where it needed to. Not long after, I got a final envelope in the mail. No return address again, but I didn't need one. Inside was a single line written in that same elegant handwriting. You've made your point. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel guilt. I felt distance. Clean, quiet, peaceful distance. They'd spent years teaching me that family was about control and debt. But now they understood that my definition had changed, that I'd built something they could never manipulate again. And in a strange, poetic way, that was the best revenge of all. Because while they were still fighting over money, reputation, and sympathy, I'd already moved on to something they'd never have, freedom. Still, something told me this wasn't the end. People like my mother didn't disappear quietly. They regrouped, waited, planned. And deep down, I knew, sooner or later, she'd try one more move. For a few months, life was quiet, unnervingly quiet. NorthNode was thriving, my team was expanding, and I'd finally started to feel like the world wasn't something I needed to defend myself against. I was sleeping again, smiling again. But in the back of my mind, I knew silence wasn't peace. Not when it came from people like my mother. It was strategy. Then, in mid-March, the storm hit. It started with a voicemail from my dad. His voice was low, defeated. "Logan, I don't know how to tell you this, son, but your mother's in trouble. Serious trouble." I didn't call back right away. I sat there for a few minutes, just staring at my phone, my coffee cooling in my hand. I knew it was coming. I didn't know what shape it would take, but I knew. When I finally called him back, he picked up on the first ring. "She's being investigated," he said, exhaling shakily. "For the credit fraud thing. Someone reported it to the state attorney's office." I went still. "Someone." He hesitated. "They said it came through the bank. Apparently, multiple institutions flagged her name after the applications you blocked last year. They connected the IP addresses, and," his voice trailed off, They want to talk to me too. I closed my eyes. It had finally caught up to her. I hadn't pressed charges, but when I filed that fraud report, it created a trail. Banks don't ignore patterns like that. Not when it looks like systematic abuse of credit. What's going to happen? I asked quietly. He sighed. They might press charges for attempted identity theft. Maybe fines. Maybe probation. I don't know. She's falling apart. I didn't say anything. He filled the silence. She said you ruined her life, Logan. That you made her look like a criminal. I swallowed hard. Dad, she is a criminal. She used my name. My information. He didn't argue. He just sounded small. I know. There was a pause. Then, softly, she asked if you'd help. Just talk to the investigators. Maybe tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I almost laughed, but it came out hollow. After everything, she still thinks I'll save her. She's your mother, he said weakly. Yeah, I said. And I'm her son, not her safety net. When we hung up, I sat in my office and just let the weight of it all settle in. I didn't feel joy, not satisfaction, just finality. The kind that comes when something that's been rotting for years finally collapses. The next few weeks felt like watching a slow-motion car wreck. News traveled fast in our hometown. Apparently, my mother's little empire of family connections, the friends she'd always bragged about, the church committees, the charity boards, started unraveling the moment people found out she was being investigated. No one wanted to be associated with someone under a financial fraud probe. Her social circle shrank overnight. The women she'd hosted dinners for stopped calling. Even the pastor's wife, who used to call her the backbone of the community, avoided her at the grocery store. Jenna, of course, tried to control the damage. She went online, posting teary videos about forgiveness and family healing. But her followers weren't sympathetic. Most of them had seen the earlier drama, the gossip threads, the comments that connected her name to mine. Sponsors pulled out. Brand deals evaporated. Her channel went quiet. Mason took it the hardest, though. He called me once, the only time I'd heard his voice since that night at the motel. You got what you wanted? Huh, he said bitterly. I didn't want this, I said. Bull, he spat. You've been waiting for us to fall apart so you could feel like the good guy. I stayed calm. You guys did this to yourselves, Mason. I didn't tell her to lie. I didn't tell her to steal. All I did was stop cleaning up after you. He was silent for a long time. Then, quieter, she's not going to recover from this. That's not on me, I said softly. That's on her. He hung up without another word. After that, I stopped answering calls from any of them. There wasn't anything left to say. The investigation dragged on for a few months. It never became a headline. It was too small for that, but word still spread. In a town like ours, you can't hide scandal. Mom ended up taking a plea deal to avoid trial. Community service, restitution, and a record that would follow her forever. Dad called one last time to tell me. He sounded tired, older than I'd ever heard him. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry, he said. For what? He hesitated. Everything, I think. But she still says she doesn't understand why you'd go this far. I took a deep breath. Because she never understood how far she pushed me. There was a pause. Then he said, I don't think she ever thought you'd really leave. I didn't leave, I said quietly. I escaped. He didn't call again after that. That summer, I got a letter in the mail. Not handwritten this time. Typed, formal, cold. It was from my mother's attorney. This letter serves to notify you that any shared financial accounts, agreements, or familial ties involving your personal assets have been permanently dissolved by mutual consent. It was sterile, final, but at the bottom, in faint ink, there was a note, clearly typed by her, not the lawyer. I hope you're happy. I folded the letter, placed it in the same drawer as all the others, and then, for the first time, locked it. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted it contained. That part of my life was over. The following months were a blur of growth. North Node expanded into 2 new cities. I hired more staff, opened a mentorship program for underprivileged youth, and even started investing in small startups led by people who reminded me of myself, ambitious but undersupported. Every success felt like a quiet middle finger to the people who once told me I was selfish for wanting more. Occasionally, I'd hear bits of news from back home, through mutual acquaintances or old classmates who still kept tabs on gossip. My parents had sold the family house to pay off fines. They'd moved into a smaller place outside town. Jenna's partner had left her, overwhelmed by the fallout. Mason had taken up a job at an auto shop, apparently working long hours to help mom and dad get back on their feet. Sometimes I'd wonder if they ever sat around that tiny new kitchen and talked about me. If they blamed me for everything that went wrong, or if, maybe, somewhere deep down, they finally realized I wasn't the villain. But even if they did, it didn't matter. Their opinions no longer had the power to shape my reality. By the time autumn came around again, 1 year after that empty Thanksgiving, I decided to take a week off and fly somewhere warm. Mexico this time. No phone calls, no emails, no obligations. Just me. On the morning of the flight, I stopped by my office to sign a few papers. When I walked in, my assistant handed me a small envelope that had arrived in the mail. No return address, but this time, I recognized the handwriting instantly. I opened it slowly, half expecting another jab, another guilt trip. But instead, there was a single line written in shaky pen. I see your grandmother's name everywhere now. You made her proud. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because I forgave her, not because it made things right, but because, maybe for just a moment, she'd understood that all the things she tried to twist into weakness had become my strength. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I walked out of the office, suitcase in hand, the city alive around me. For once, I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't chasing approval or fighting ghosts. I was free, completely, finally, undeniably free. And as the elevator doors closed, I thought about all the times my mother had said, "Family supports family." She was right, just not in the way she ever meant. Because in the end, the only person who ever truly supported me was me. When my sister sneered, "Must be nice having money while your family struggles," I swear I felt something in me snap. My name's Noah. I'm 28, and I used to think family loyalty meant helping whenever you could. I don't think that anymore. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you don't want help. They want a lifeline they can keep cutting until you drown trying to save them. I come from a small Midwestern town where everyone knows everyone, and money is the unspoken measure of worth. My parents weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Dad worked construction until his back gave out, and Mom taught part-time at the local elementary school. They always drilled one thing into me and my sister, Emily: take care of each other. Back then, that sounded sweet. Now, it feels like a curse. Emily's 2 years younger than me, 26 going on 16, if you ask me. She was always the golden child. I was the quiet one who did his homework, worked part-time jobs, and saved every dollar I could. She was the one who just needed a little help every other week. Growing up, if Emily forgot her lunch, I gave her mine. If she wrecked her car, Dad asked me to lend her money from my college fund because you're the responsible one, son. I did it every time because that's what family was supposed to do. Fast forward a decade, and not much had changed, except the stakes were higher. After college, I got a decent job in software development, moved to the city, and worked my way up. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was careful. I budgeted. I invested. I made sure my bills were always paid on time. Emily, on the other hand, went through jobs like tissues. She had a new passion project every few months. 1 month it was a candle business. The next she wanted to become an influencer. She'd post filtered photos with captions like, "Trust the process sparkles," while asking me to spot her for rent because the algorithm's just slow right now. At first, I helped. I really did. I paid her phone bill just this once. I helped her make a budget she never followed. I even paid off her credit card once after she cried over the phone about debt collectors calling her. But eventually, I noticed something. She never actually wanted to get better. She wanted to keep playing the victim and let me play savior. Things came to a head last winter. I'd just gotten promoted to senior developer, and for the first time, I was thinking about buying my own place. I called my parents, excited to share the news. Mom congratulated me, but Dad's tone was oddly flat. "That's great, son," he said. "Hey, your sister's been going through a rough patch. Maybe you can help her out a bit, just until she gets back on her feet." I asked, rough patch meaning what? Well, he hesitated. She quit her job, said it was too toxic. But she's really trying, Noah. She just needs a little cushion. A little cushion turned out to be $2,500 in rent and bills she'd ignored for months. I told him, gently, that I couldn't just keep bailing her out. That's when Mom sighed into the phone and said, "You've always had such a good heart. Honey, don't harden it now." That sentence stuck with me, not because of what she said, but what she meant. In their eyes, being good meant sacrificing myself so others could stay comfortable. A few days later, Emily called. No hello, no small talk. So Dad said you're being weird about helping me. I'm not being weird, I said. I just think you need to start managing your money better. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh my gosh, listen to Mr. Budget Planner. You think just because you have a steady job, you're better than me? I took a deep breath. No, Emily. I think I'm just tired of fixing problems you keep making. Her tone shifted, cold, sharp. Must be nice having money while your family struggles, she said. Real brotherly of you. And that was it. That line. The way she said it, like I owed her something. Like my success was a personal betrayal. I hung up before saying something I'd regret, but the anger stayed with me all night. For weeks, things were tense. I didn't visit for Christmas. I told them I had a work project, which was true, but also an excuse. My parents called, texted, even guilt tripped me a little. Emily misses you, Mom said. She's trying. But every time I saw her latest Instagram story, new outfits, brunch with friends, a weekend getaway, I felt my blood boil. She wasn't trying. She was coasting on everyone else's patience. Then came the blow-up. It was early spring. I drove home one weekend for Dad's birthday, thinking maybe it was time to patch things up. I walked into the house with a gift and some good whiskey I'd bought for him. Emily was already there, sitting on the couch scrolling her phone, looking like she hadn't worked a day in months. The moment she saw me, she smirked. Well, look who decided to visit the peasants. I forced a smile. Hey, Emily. She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be fake. I know you're just here to show off how well you're doing. What's next? Gonna talk about your fancy job and your big city apartment. I glanced at Dad, hoping he'd say something, but he just sighed and looked at his drink. Let's not start, he muttered. Emily kept going. You know what's funny? You act like you're self-made, but you forget all the times Mom and Dad helped you. Who do you think paid for your first car? Your college textbooks? You wouldn't be anywhere without them. Or me. I stared at her, speechless. Without you. I repeated. You mean the same you who borrowed from my college fund to fix your car? The same you who still owes me $2,000 from last year. She scoffed. You're so dramatic. It's just money. You have plenty. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I'd spent years believing being kind meant being forgiving. But maybe being kind also meant knowing when to stop letting people walk over you. I set the whiskey on the counter and turned to Dad. Happy birthday, I said quietly. I'll see you later. As I walked toward the door, Emily called after me. Oh, come on, don't storm off. You're seriously mad over money? Grow up. I didn't even look back. That night, I got a call from my manager, a job offer in Seattle. Better pay, bigger challenge, a fresh start. It felt like fate handing me an escape route. I accepted. I didn't even tell my family right away. I just started packing. 2 days later, I told them over dinner. I got a new job, I said. I'll be moving across the country next month. Mom clapped her hands, trying to sound supportive. That's wonderful, sweetie. Emily, of course, had to chime in. Oh, so now you're too good for all of us. It's not like that, I said. It's a great opportunity. She leaned back, arms crossed. Yeah, sure. Just running away so you don't have to deal with your family's problems anymore. I put my fork down. Emily, I've been dealing with your problems for years. Maybe it's time you deal with your own. Her voice rose. You think you're some kind of hero because you moved out and got a job? Newsflash, not everyone gets lucky like you. Lucky, I said quietly. You call working every weekend, saving every dollar, and saying no to every party lucky? That's when she snapped. Whatever. Enjoy your perfect little life while the rest of us struggle. I didn't answer. I just stood up and said, I'm not your bank, Emily. She glared at me like I'd insulted her religion. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Help her or don't bother coming home. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling my stomach twist. That night, I made a decision I didn't think I ever would. I cut every financial tie. And by sunrise, my phone lit up with 41 missed calls. From Emily. From Mom. From Dad. Each one a reminder that the line between love and obligation had finally snapped. But that was only the beginning, because what happened after I left changed everything. The morning after those 41 missed calls, I woke up with that hollow ache you get after a fight that went too far. The kind where you replay every word in your head, wondering if maybe you should have stayed quiet, taken the higher road. But then I looked at my phone again. 41 missed calls, 15 texts, and one long, guilt-ridden voicemail from my mom, and the ache hardened into something else. I'd finally drawn a boundary, and they hated me for it. I didn't call anyone back. I went through the motions at work, packed boxes at night, and told myself this move to Seattle wasn't an escape. It was a reset. A clean slate where I didn't have to be the family ATM, the responsible one, the guy who was supposed to fix everyone else's mess. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. These were my parents, my sister, the people who raised me, who I thought would be proud that I was building something for myself. Instead, they acted like I'd turned my back on them. A few days passed before Mom finally caught me off guard with a call during my lunch break. Her tone was syrupy sweet at first, but I knew that voice. It was her soft, entry voice, the one she used before lowering the boom. "Oh, honey," she started. "We've all been so worried. You didn't have to cut us off like that. You know how your sister can be." She didn't mean what she said. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, she called me selfish for not paying her bills. Dad told me not to come home. What exactly did they mean then? She sighed heavily. You know how your father gets when he's upset. He didn't mean it literally. And your sister? Well, she's just under a lot of pressure. Pressure from what? I asked. She doesn't have a job, Mom. She hasn't had one in months. That's not fair, she said quickly, defensive. She's been applying. She's trying to find something that fits. Something that fits. I'd heard that line before. It was code for, she doesn't want to work somewhere that doesn't stroke her ego. I can't keep rescuing her, I said quietly. I'm moving, Mom. I need to focus on my own life. There was silence on the other end. Then, the shift, that slight edge in her tone that always made me feel like I was 12 again. You know, she said, I never thought I'd see the day when my son valued money more than family. That one stung, even though I saw it coming. She knew exactly how to twist the knife, not through yelling, but through disappointment. That's what made it work. I didn't answer. I just said, I love you, Mom, but this isn't about money, and hung up before she could keep going. That evening, Emily posted a picture on Instagram. Her at some fancy rooftop bar, drink in hand, captioned, when your family turns their back on you, but God doesn't. I laughed out loud when I saw it. One of those bitter, disbelieving laughs that sound more like a choke. There she was, the family martyr, living her truth for likes and sympathy comments. And the comments poured in. You're too good for them. Stay strong, queen. They'll regret it. She liked everyone. Meanwhile, my mom reposted one of those cryptic Facebook memes the next morning. A family that forgets loyalty isn't a family at all. Guess who it was aimed at? I thought about calling them again, clearing things up, explaining that I wasn't abandoning anyone. But I knew how that conversation would go. They'd twist my words, Emily would cry, Dad would guilt-trip me about turning my back on my blood. So instead, I poured myself into preparing for the move. But just when things started feeling peaceful again, Emily found a new way to get under my skin. One Saturday, as I was boxing up my computer equipment, I got a notification from my bank. A $450 charge to an Uber account I didn't recognize. Then another for food delivery. Then another for online shopping. My heart sank. I called the bank, thinking maybe my card got stolen. But the representative said something that made my jaw drop. Sir, the charges are linked to a secondary cardholder on your account. A Miss Emily Carter. I nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean secondary cardholder? I never authorized that. Sir, she was added about a year ago. Same last name, matching address to your parents' house. I froze. I remembered now. A year earlier, Emily had begged me to co-sign for a new card because hers kept getting declined. It's just temporary, she'd said. I need to order supplies for my candle business. I'll pay it all off before the end of the month. I'd agreed, stupidly, naively, and then forgotten about it when she promised she'd cancel it. Freeze it, I told the bank rep, my voice shaking. Freeze it now. When I texted Emily, she replied instantly. Are you serious right now? You froze my card? I was in the middle of getting groceries. I typed back, you've been charging hundreds on MY account. Without asking, her reply came fast. Relax, I was going to pay it back. You've got money, why are you being so stingy? That word again. Stingy. Like being responsible was a moral flaw. I didn't answer. I blocked her number, changed every password I could think of, and spent the rest of the evening in a fog of disbelief. I'd thought Emily's entitlement had limits. Turns out, it didn't even have brakes. 2 days later, I got a call from Dad. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me I should. What is wrong with you, Noah? He snapped before I could even say hello. Good morning to you too, I said. Don't you smart mouth me. Emily called me in tears because you froze her account and embarrassed her in front of her friends. I blinked. Dad, she was stealing from me. She wasn't stealing, he shot back. She was borrowing. You're her brother. You're supposed to help. I've helped for years, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I've paid her bills, her debts, her. Oh, stop keeping score, he interrupted. Family doesn't keep score. No, I said quietly. Family doesn't exploit each other either. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said something I'll never forget. You've changed, Noah. Ever since you got that city job, you act like you're better than everyone else. I almost laughed, but it came out sounding more like a sigh. Dad, I'm just trying to live responsibly. You taught me to work hard, to plan ahead. That's what I'm doing. Well, maybe you learned the wrong lessons, he said bitterly. Because family comes before money. And then he hung up. That night, I sat in my half-empty apartment surrounded by boxes, staring at the ceiling, and realized something. They didn't actually see me. Not as a son, not as a brother, just as a resource. A lifeline. The walking wallet who never said no. And now that I had, I was the villain. The following week, my parents announced a family dinner before my move. I almost didn't go, but guilt still has a way of sinking its hooks in you. So I showed up. Big mistake. The minute I walked in, Emily hugged me, fake and tight, then whispered in my ear, "Hope you're not planning to make this awkward." I pulled back, forcing a smile. That depends on whether you plan to ask for more money. She rolled her eyes. You really can't let things go, can you? Dinner was tense, to say the least. Mom made roast beef and mashed potatoes, but no one talked much. Every sentence felt like stepping on glass. Halfway through, Dad cleared his throat. Your mother and I wanted to talk about something, he said, folding his hands. We think you should reconsider moving so far away. I set my fork down. Why? Because, Mom said softly, we're worried about Emily. She's been struggling emotionally since all this drama. I stared at them. So you want me to stay because Emily's upset that I won't pay for her lifestyle? Don't be cruel, Mom said, eyes narrowing. She's family. You're abandoning her when she needs you most. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. I'm protecting myself. Dad's jaw tightened. You're being selfish. There it was, the family motto, dressed up as a moral lesson. I felt the old guilt rising in my chest, but this time I pushed it down. Then Emily spoke, voice dripping with mock sweetness. You know, if I had even half your salary, I'd help out without making such a big deal about it. I turned to her slowly. You'd help? You mean like when I paid off your credit card and you went on vacation 2 weeks later? Or when I covered your rent and you bought a new iPhone? Her smile faltered. You don't have to humiliate me. I'm not, I said quietly. I'm reminding you that generosity without gratitude isn't kindness, it's stupidity. And I've been stupid for a long time. Mom gasped. Noah. But before I could respond, Dad stood up, voice booming. That's enough. You've made your point. Now either you apologize to your sister, or you can leave. For a moment, no one breathed. Then I pushed back my chair, stood up, and said, okay. And I left. I didn't look back. That night, I drove back to my apartment in silence, the road lights flashing across the windshield like clock ticks. By the time I got home, there were 5 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Emily, and a single text from Dad. Don't bother coming home next Christmas. I didn't answer. I didn't cry, either. I just sat there, staring out the window, feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Just clarity. They'd made their choice, and I was about to make mine. But I had no idea just how far they were about to go next, or how much lower they'd sink before I finally broke. I thought things couldn't get worse after that dinner. I thought I'd reached the point where I was numb enough that nothing my family did could surprise me anymore. But I was wrong. What came next didn't just sting, it hollowed me out. It made me realize that once people learn they can take from you, they'll start believing they deserve to. And when you finally stop giving, they'll do whatever it takes to take again. The next few weeks were a blur. My apartment slowly emptied into cardboard boxes, and the more I packed, the lighter I felt. Every dish wrapped, every shelf cleared felt like closing a chapter one should have ended years ago. My manager had already arranged temporary housing in Seattle, and my start date was coming fast. I told myself once I got on that plane, I'd be free. But freedom, It turned out, wasn't something I'd get easily. Not with my family. It started with small, suspicious things. A strange call from my bank asking if I'd recently applied for a car loan. Then an email from a credit monitoring service I barely used, warning me about a new account opened in your name. I brushed it off at first, maybe a glitch. But then a letter arrived. It was from a financing company I'd never heard of, confirming an application for a personal loan of $18,000. The letter congratulated me on my new opportunity. My stomach dropped. The address listed was my parents' home. I called the company immediately. "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm. "I think there's been a mistake. I didn't apply for any loan." The woman on the other end asked for my name and the reference number, typing away. Then she said, "It looks like your application was submitted online 2 days ago. The listed contact number matches the one ending in 14 to 29. Is that yours?" My throat went dry. That was my parents' landline. "Who signed the application?" I asked. "Let me check. It says Emily Carter." I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "She's not me. That's my sister." "Oh," the woman said, her tone shifting slightly. "Well, since she used your information, we'll need to start a fraud investigation." Fraud. That word hit harder than it should have. I hung up, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. Emily had crossed a line I didn't even think she knew existed. She wasn't just borrowing my money anymore. She was stealing my name. I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "What now? What now?" I repeated, trying not to yell. "You used my identity to apply for a loan." There was a pause. "Oh, that. Calm down. It's not a big deal. I just needed a co-signer." "I didn't co-sign anything." I snapped. "You forged my information." "Relax, Noah," she said, laughing lightly, like this was all a joke. "It's not like I was going to let it go unpaid. I just needed a quick approval and figured you wouldn't mind." "Wouldn't mind?" I repeated. "You committed fraud. Do you even understand what that means?" "You're so dramatic," she said, groaning. "You have good credit. You'll be fine." "Emily," I said, my voice shaking, "you used my identity to take out $18,000. That's not fine. That's illegal." "Oh, please," she said, her tone sharp now. "You always act like you're this moral hero. You can afford it. You make enough to cover a stupid loan if it came down to it." I couldn't even speak for a moment. The entitlement in her voice, the complete lack of guilt, made my skin crawl. "I'm calling the company back," I said finally. "And the police, if I have to." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "You'd ruin my life." "You already tried to ruin mine," I said, and hung up. I expected the fallout to come from her. Angry texts, threats, tears, but it came from Dad instead. He called within an hour, his voice full of fire. "What did you say to your sister?" "That she committed fraud," I said flatly. "Because she did." He let out a long, angry breath. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." "I'm sorry, what?" "She didn't mean any harm," he said, like he was talking to a child. "She just panicked. She needed money for her car repairs and didn't want to bother us." "She didn't want to bother you?" I said incredulously. "So she stole my information instead?" "Watch your tone," he warned. "You think you're perfect because you've got a good job, but you don't understand how hard things are for her. Because she makes them hard." I yelled, "Dad, this isn't a mistake. It's a crime. Do you realize she used my social security number?" "She's family," he said after a long pause. "We protect family." I closed my eyes, exhaling shakily. "You mean we protect her?" He didn't deny it. "You'll figure out how to fix it. You're smart." That line, that quiet, dismissive, "you'll figure it out," broke something in me. I'd been figuring it out my whole life. Fixing problems I didn't cause. Paying for mistakes that weren't mine. Carrying responsibility for people who refused to carry their own. And now, when my sister committed a literal crime, their first instinct was to protect her. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next few days were chaos. I spent hours on calls with banks, lenders, and credit bureaus, trying to lock down my accounts. I had to file a police report to prove I hadn't been the one who applied for the loan. The officer I spoke with was polite but blunt. "You'll probably need to press charges for this to go anywhere," he said. That word again, charges. Against my own sister. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But when I thought about what would happen if I didn't, how she'd just do it again, maybe even ruin my credit permanently, I knew I didn't have a choice. So I filed. That night, I sat in the dark with a glass of whiskey and stared at my phone, half expecting it to explode with angry messages. But it was quiet. For the first time in months, my phone was completely, eerily silent. Until it wasn't. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from Mom. "How could you?" That was it. 3 words. No context needed. Then another came. "She's your sister. You're destroying her life over a misunderstanding." Then, "We raised you better than this." I didn't respond. At 2 in the morning, Dad called. His voice was low, shaking with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The cops showed up here. They talked to your mother. She's been crying for hours. She used my name to steal money," I said quietly. "She was desperate. She broke the law." "You're heartless," he spat. "You're not welcome in this house anymore." I didn't even argue. "Okay," I said softly. "Then I won't come back." He hung up. By morning, my phone was flooded again. 30 missed calls this time, mostly from Mom and Emily. But one message stood out. It wasn't angry or dramatic. It was from Emily herself. Just one sentence. "You'll regret this, Noah." And something about that chilled me to the bone. That day, I went to work like nothing happened, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept waiting for the next shoe to drop. And sure enough, it did, in a way I never could have predicted. When I got home that evening, there was a letter taped to my door. No name, no return address. Just my name written in sloppy handwriting I recognized immediately. Emily's. Inside was a single piece of paper. A photocopy of the police report I'd filed, the one with my name, address, and case number. At the bottom, in pen, she'd written, "You really want to play this game? Let's see who wins." I just stood there in my doorway, staring at it, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was a threat. And over the next few days, the harassment started. Anonymous emails. Fake subscription signups. My number posted to random online listings. A pizza delivery I never ordered showing up at midnight. I knew it was her. Every petty, passive-aggressive stunt screamed Emily's name. I changed my number, closed my old email, even alerted my office's HR department in case she tried contacting them. It was exhausting, humiliating, and exactly what she wanted. But then she crossed another line, one that made my decision to leave feel like the only way out. A week before my move, I got a call from HR. "Hey, Noah, sorry to bother you," my manager said cautiously, "but we received a message about you this morning." An anonymous email. "It accuses you of financial misconduct." My heart dropped. "What?" "It's obviously nonsense," he said quickly, "but I figured you should know. It came from someone claiming to be a relative." I didn't even have to ask. I knew exactly who it was. Emily wasn't content with ruining my credit. She wanted to ruin my reputation too. I left work early that day and drove straight to the airport to finalize my move arrangements. I remember sitting in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, realizing just how far she'd gone, and how far I'd let it get before finally standing up for myself. That night, I made a promise. Once I got to Seattle, I wasn't just cutting ties, I was burning the bridge to ashes. But before I could even leave, Emily wasn't done. Because the next morning, I woke up to something that made my blood run cold. Something that turned this whole family drama into a full-blown war. And it started with my own parents. When I say that morning changed everything, I mean it. It was the kind of day where reality doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly, like a leak in a ceiling you didn't know was there until the whole roof starts sagging. I woke up to dozens of new notifications, and before I even unlocked my phone, I had that sinking feeling in my gut that something had gone terribly wrong. The first thing I saw was my mother's post on Facebook. It was a long, emotional wall of text, written in that passive-aggressive tone she used whenever she wanted to guilt people without sounding like she was guilting them. The post started with, "Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you the deepest," and ended with, "Family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty." She never mentioned names, of course, but anyone who knew us knew exactly who she was talking about. The comments section was full of sympathy. "Stay strong, Linda," heart emoji. "You raised your kids right. Sometimes they just lose their way. God will bring healing." And then there was Emily's comment, right near the top. "Love you, Mom." Some people just forget where they came from. That one stung like acid. I sat there staring at the screen, scrolling through strangers pitying my family for what I apparently did to them. And for the first time in years, I actually felt something break inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just exhaustion. like all the air had gone out of me at once. I didn't respond. I didn't post some long, defensive essay. I just logged off. But the damage had already been done. My extended family, cousins, aunts, even a few old neighbors, started messaging me privately. "Hey, are you okay? Your mom's really upset. What's going on? I thought you and Emily were close." And the worst one, "You shouldn't turn your back on your family, Noah. They won't be around forever." That line played on repeat in my head all day. They won't be around forever. It sounded like both a warning and a curse. When I got to work, I tried to bury myself in tasks, but my focus was shot. My chest felt tight all day, my mind spinning through what-ifs. What if they started showing up at my apartment? What if they called my employer again? What if, God forbid, they found a way to mess with my new job offer? By the time I got home, my building's leasing office had left a note on my door. I opened it, expecting some random maintenance update, but instead found a notice. "A complaint has been filed regarding harassment and noise disturbances linked to your unit." My hands went cold. I hadn't had a single party, hadn't even played loud music. Then I noticed the attached evidence, a screenshot of a Yelp review about me. Someone had left a 1-star review for my apartment building, claiming, "A tenant named Noah Carter is constantly screaming at people over the phone, slamming doors, and threatening neighbors. Management should evict him before he hurts someone." I read that review 5 times, numb. It was fake, obviously. I'd never even spoken to a neighbor beyond a polite nod. But I knew that writing style. The dramatics, the exaggerated victimhood. "Emily." I marched downstairs to the leasing office, holding the letter. The manager, a kind woman named Rachel, looked mortified when I showed her. "Oh my gosh, Noah, we didn't take this seriously. We just had to log the complaint because it mentioned safety. We'll remove it once we confirm it's fake." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I know who did it," I said quietly. "I just don't have proof." Rachel frowned. "If this person is targeting you, document everything. Keep screenshots. And be careful, okay? Be careful." I hadn't realized until that moment how much those 2 words applied. I wasn't just dealing with a manipulative sister anymore. I was dealing with someone unhinged enough to risk my home, my job, and my sanity just to get revenge. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through old photos, family trips, birthdays, holidays. There was Emily, smiling in every picture, arms around me like we were the closest siblings in the world. And behind the photos, I could almost hear her voice. "You'll regret this." The next morning, I decided to check my credit report again, just to be sure everything was locked. And that's when I saw it. Another loan inquiry, this time from a different lender. Same name, same address as before. I felt sick. I'd already filed the fraud report. The bank had frozen my accounts. How was she still trying? I called the lender, and sure enough, someone had tried to open another loan using my information, again listing my parents' address. Thankfully, it had been flagged and denied. But the representative told me something that made my stomach twist. "Mr. Carter, this was the 3rd attempt this week." 3rd. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. My own sister was actively trying to ruin me. And my parents, judging by their silence, were either ignoring it or helping her. Later that afternoon, my dad called. His tone was flat, almost rehearsed. "I just want you to know we're disappointed, Noah. We didn't raise you to treat family like enemies." "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "she's committing identity theft. Do you even understand how serious this is?" "She told us you exaggerated everything," he said, like that settled it. That it was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I snapped. "She used my name to take out loans. She forged my signature. She said you gave her permission," he said quietly. "That you're just embarrassed now that the police got involved." My jaw tightened. "You actually believe that?" He hesitated, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. "I see," I said. "You're choosing to believe the person who's been lying her whole life over the one who's been bailing her out for years. You're twisting this," he said quickly. "We're just trying to keep the peace." "Peace?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean silence. You want me to shut up and take it. You always have." There was a long pause. Then he said coldly, "Maybe you should think about what you're saying. You've been very self-centered lately." And with that, he hung up. Something inside me just snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, phone still in my hand, feeling like someone had scooped out my insides and left nothing behind. That night, I walked outside, past the quiet rows of parked cars, the hum of the city fading into white noise. I ended up sitting on a bench near the edge of the parking lot, staring at the horizon where the streetlights bled into the fog. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. No family, no safety net, just me. But the thing about hitting rock bottom is that it's quiet. You stop flailing, stop trying to convince anyone to understand you. You start thinking differently. I remember whispering to myself, "You can't fix them." It was such a simple sentence, but it felt like a revelation. I'd spent my entire life being the fixer, the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who always cleaned up after everyone else's mess. But maybe it was time to stop fixing and start protecting myself. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop titled Exit Plan. It wasn't some dramatic scheme, just a list of steps. Cancel old bank accounts. Change all passwords. Get a new phone number. Move job paperwork to new address. Legal consultation regarding fraud case. No contact after move. I stared at that last line for a long time. No contact after move. It sounded harsh, but I knew it was the only way. Over the next few days, I moved in silence. I didn't tell anyone my exact move date. I rerouted my mail to a P.O. box. I packed everything myself. I even took time off work under the pretense of personal reasons so I could disappear quietly. Then, 3 days before my flight, I got one last call. It was from Mom. She sounded broken. "Noah, please. Don't do this." "Do what?" I asked. "Run away," she said, voice trembling. "We're family. We can fix this." "Mom," I said softly, "you can't fix something you refuse to see is broken." She started crying. "You're punishing us. You're punishing your sister. She made a mistake, but she's still your family." "Mom," I said, "this isn't punishment. It's self-preservation." There was a long silence. Then, in that same small voice, she said, "If you go, don't expect us to be here when you decide to come back." It hurt. Of course it did. But I didn't argue. I just said, "I hope one day you'll see why I had to," and hung up. When I boarded that flight 3 days later, I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. I just stared out the window as the plane lifted off, my hometown shrinking beneath the clouds. For the first time in years, I felt free. But freedom has a strange taste when it comes after betrayal. It's sweet for a second, then leaves an aftertaste of guilt and fear. I thought I'd left it all behind. I thought distance would fix what they broke. I was wrong again. Because 2 weeks after moving to Seattle, I got an email that made my blood run cold. It wasn't from my sister. It wasn't from my parents. It was from my HR department. The subject line read, "Urgent, compliance review regarding allegations." And attached was a forwarded email from someone using my sister's name. It began, "To whom it may concern, I feel obligated to report ongoing unethical financial behavior by your employee, Noah Carter." When I opened that email, my stomach dropped so hard it felt like I'd been punched. I read it once, then again, then a third time, just to be sure my brain wasn't inventing words. But no, it was all there, plain as day. Emily had sent a long, detailed message to my company's HR department, pretending to be some concerned acquaintance. She accused me of financial fraud, claimed I abused my position to steal client funds, and even attached what looked like bank statements, fake ones, with my name on them. I just sat there at my desk, staring at the screen as my heart pounded. I could feel the walls closing in. I'd barely been at my new job 2 weeks. I'd worked for years to earn this position, sacrificed everything for a chance to start fresh. And now my own sister was trying to burn it all down before I'd even settled in. HR had marked the email as potentially defamatory, but they still needed to conduct a preliminary review, which meant I had to sit through an hour-long meeting explaining that, no, I hadn't stolen a cent, and yes, I could provide verification for every bank account, transaction, and line of income one had. It was humiliating. Sitting there, trying to keep my voice calm, while my manager and HR rep looked at me with polite but wary eyes. They believed me, I think. At least mostly. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. A seed of doubt had been planted. When I got home that night, I poured myself a drink and just sat on the couch staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every step of my life that led me here. Every moment I tried to do the right thing. Every time I'd chosen family over myself. And this was the reward, being slandered by the very people I'd once protected. For a while, I just let myself sit in the anger, the grief, The sense of betrayal, so deep it almost felt surreal. But at some point, between the second and third drink, something inside me hardened. I realized I couldn't keep reacting to their chaos. Every time I defended myself, I was playing their game. A game designed to make me look guilty, desperate, unstable. I needed to stop defending and start building. I needed to become untouchable. That was the night everything changed. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done being reactive. I was going to outgrow them so completely that they'd choke on their own bitterness. It started with my work. I threw myself into it. I stayed late every night, volunteered for projects, took the hardest assignments no one else wanted. Within months, my name started getting noticed by higher-ups. I got an invitation to lead a small development team on a new initiative. It wasn't just a title. It came with autonomy, respect, and a raise big enough that I actually laughed when I saw the number. I also started saving aggressively, investing carefully, learning every financial trick I could. If Emily and my parents wanted to make me the villain for hoarding money, fine. I was going to become the kind of villain who never had to rely on anyone again. Outside of work, I built walls. Not emotional ones, practical ones. New phone number. New email. I switched banks entirely. I even legally changed my mailing address to a virtual office suite so no one would ever know where I lived unless I wanted them to. And for the first time in my life, I started saying no without guilt. No, I wasn't answering their calls. No, I wasn't sending a little something for birthdays. No, I wasn't going to let them back in, no matter how many messages they left. At first, it was eerie silence. Then came the predictable wave of guilt trips. My mom sent me a card that said, "Families fight, but love always wins," with a note inside. "We're ready to forgive you whenever you're ready to come home." That last line made me laugh. Forgive me. Like I was the one who needed forgiving. I didn't respond. Then Dad tried. He left a voicemail, his tone full of forced warmth. "Hey son, just checking in. Your mom misses you. We're proud of how far you've come. Emily's been struggling lately. Maybe a little help would mean a lot." A little help. I almost admired the audacity. I deleted it and blocked the number. For the next 6 months, life got quieter and better. My new team crushed its first big project, earning company-wide recognition. My boss even pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "You've got a leadership mindset. You ever think about management?" I didn't say it out loud, but yeah, I had been thinking about it. Not just management, ownership. I wanted to build something of my own. Something no one could take credit for or destroy. So I started working nights and weekends on an app idea I'd been sitting on for years. It was a personal finance tool, ironic, I know, designed to help young adults build savings habits and track spending. I called it Haven. At first, it was just a hobby. But as I built it out, I realized it could actually be something. My early prototype caught the attention of a startup accelerator in Seattle. I applied on a whim, not expecting much, and to my shock, I got in. They gave me mentorship, funding, and exposure. Suddenly, I was in meetings with investors, learning pitch strategies, refining my business plan. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't running from something. I was running towards something. It was around this time that I got an unexpected email from an unknown address. Subject line, "We saw your story." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But when I opened it, it wasn't spam at all. It was from a journalist, someone writing an article on family financial boundaries and generational entitlement. She said she'd stumbled across one of my old Reddit posts from months earlier, one where I'd vented anonymously about my sister's fraud and my parents' reaction. She asked if I'd be willing to talk, anonymously, about the experience. At first, I hesitated. But then I thought, why not? If my story could help someone else see the warning signs early, maybe it was worth it. The article went live 2 weeks later. My name wasn't in it, but the quotes were mine, my voice, my pain, my warning. It blew up online. Thousands of comments. People sharing their own stories about manipulative siblings, toxic parents, and the guilt of walking away. Reading those comments was like therapy. For the first time, I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't the villain. I was just someone who finally stopped bleeding for people who refused to stop cutting. That article became the catalyst for something bigger. Investors who'd read it started reaching out to Haven, saying they loved the mission, helping people set financial boundaries and build independence. It was surreal. The very thing that almost destroyed me became the thing that fueled my success. A year later, Haven launched publicly. Within 6 months, it hit 500,000 downloads. Financial blogs started calling it the app that teaches you to say no. The irony wasn't lost on me. By then, I'd grown into someone I barely recognized. Calmer, sharper, deliberate. I had a small team working for me, a steady stream of revenue, and enough savings that I didn't flinch when I looked at my account balances. But more importantly, I had peace. Until, of course, the peace got interrupted. It was a Friday evening when my phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn, a connection request. The name made my heart stutter. Emily Carter. I hadn't seen or heard from her in almost a year. My immediate instinct was to block and move on. But then I noticed something strange. Her profile headline read, Financial Consultant, Carter Family Enterprises. Carter Family Enterprises. I frowned. That wasn't real. My parents didn't own a business. Unless. I clicked. The company page had been created just a month earlier. No website, no employees, just a tagline. Helping families rebuild trust and financial stability. I almost laughed. My sister, the same person who stole my identity, was now branding herself as a financial consultant? But the laughter faded when I saw the banner photo. It wasn't just Emily in it. It was her and my parents, smiling, standing together in front of a house that looked very familiar. My childhood home. They'd turned the house into their office. And then I saw it, a pinned post. A photo of Emily shaking hands with someone in a suit, captioned, So grateful for new beginnings and second chances. Excited to build something that helps others after what our family went through. The comments were full of praise. People cheering her on. Some even mentioning how brave she was for overcoming trauma caused by a selfish sibling. My chest tightened. My past, my pain, had become her marketing strategy. I didn't comment. I didn't message her. I just stared at that page, realizing this wasn't over. Because if there's one thing I'd learned by now, it's that when people like Emily can't control you anymore, they'll try to control your story. And I wasn't about to let that happen. Not again. Because now, I wasn't just her brother. I was someone with power, resources, and reach. And I was done letting her write my narrative. Seeing that LinkedIn page was like getting punched and smirked at the same time. There she was, my sister, the self-proclaimed financial consultant, standing in front of our old house, smiling like a politician. The audacity wasn't new, but this time it had teeth. I wasn't just angry. I was impressed almost. She'd figured out how to weaponize reputation. But she'd forgotten one thing. Lies need believers to survive. And I had something she didn't. Proof, credibility, and a platform. For the next few days, I didn't do anything rash. I didn't message her. Didn't call my parents. I just started gathering information. Late at night, after my team wrapped up work on Haven, I'd pour a cup of coffee and go digging. I found that Carter Family Enterprises was registered as an LLC by my father. The address listed was our old home. The registration date? Just 2 months after I'd filed the fraud report against Emily. My guess? They used the settlement money from selling my grandmother's old property, money that was supposed to be divided equally between us siblings. Except, of course, it never was. That part stung more than I wanted to admit. My grandmother had left that property to be split fairly among her grandchildren. Emily had insisted we wait before dividing it, claimed she'd handle the paperwork. I was busy at the time, juggling work and moving, so I let it slide. Turns out, she'd cashed it in and rolled it into their new business. A fraudulent business built on stolen inheritance. That irony was almost poetic. But I didn't want poetry. I wanted precision. That week, I called an old mentor of mine, Graham, a venture capitalist who'd backed my startup in the early days. Graham was one of those rare businessmen who still had a moral compass. Sharp as a blade, with a memory like a steel trap. When he picked up, I said, Graham, I need advice. Hypothetically speaking, what's the best way to expose a fraudulent company without getting dragged into the mud? He laughed softly. Hypothetically? That's a dangerous word. I'm serious, I said. This company's built on lies. Family ties, manipulation, maybe even stolen funds. I don't want revenge. I want truth. He paused for a moment. Truth and revenge often share a road. You just need to decide which exit you're taking. I told him everything. Not every emotional detail, just the facts. The fake business, the fraud attempts, the inheritance theft. He listened quietly, then said, File a complaint with the state's business bureau. but that'll take months. You want something faster? Yes. Then hit them where they thrive, public perception. If she's using her story to get clients, prove her story's false. How? Don't attack her directly, he said. Let the truth surface naturally. People trust what looks like exposure, not accusation. That stuck with me. So I started planning. I contacted a friend who ran a small but respected personal finance podcast. We'd met during Haven's early publicity tour. She'd loved the app's mission about financial boundaries, and we'd kept in touch. I told her I wanted to do an episode on family financial manipulation, based on real experiences, but anonymized. When we recorded it, I told the story like it wasn't mine. I used different names, slightly changed locations, and stripped the emotional fluff. Just facts. How a sibling used family guilt and forged documents. How parents enabled it. How the victim rebuilt from scratch. The episode blew up. Within days, comments poured in. People sharing similar experiences, thanking the guest for being brave enough to talk about it. And among the comments, a few users who claimed they recognized the fictional story. One even tagged Carter Family Enterprises under the post, saying, "This sounds familiar." That's when things started to unravel. Apparently, my sister had been using my story, her twisted version of it, to gain sympathy clients. She'd built her business around the narrative of being the betrayed sibling, the one who'd been cut off by her cold-hearted brother after he embezzled family funds. But now, with the podcast spreading and people connecting dots, that narrative started to crack. The irony? I didn't even have to reveal myself. Other people did it for me. A few sharp Redditors cross-referenced public LLC records and noticed something odd. The consultant running the company had been named in a fraud complaint the previous year. It spread like wildfire. Within days, financial forums and small business groups were sharing screenshots, asking questions like, "Is this the same Emily Carter who's running that family enterprise?" By the end of the week, their Facebook page was flooded with negative comments. Clients demanding refunds. People asking if the fraud story was true. I watched it unfold from my apartment, calm as ever, sipping coffee. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I knew before answering who it was. "Noah," came her voice, tight, shaky. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said. People asked questions. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "My business, our reputation." "You ruined it yourself," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I just stopped protecting you from the truth." She was silent for a moment, then said, "You think you've won? You think anyone cares about your sad little revenge? Mom and Dad will never forgive you." "I'm not looking for forgiveness," I said quietly. "Just closure." She hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel shaken by her anger. Just done. But the dominoes were still falling. A few weeks later, I got a call from a journalist, the same one who'd interviewed me for that first article about financial boundaries. She sounded excited. "Noah, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Remember that anonymous family business scandal that's been trending? Turns out it's tied to your old hometown. Some sources linked it to your sister." I feigned surprise. "Wow, that's crazy." She laughed. "Yeah, crazy. We're working on a follow-up piece about how victims of financial abuse sometimes rebuild stronger than ever. We'd love to feature Haven again. And maybe a redemption arc, from your perspective." That was the moment I realized I didn't just survive. I'd flipped the script completely. The same story they tried to destroy me with had become my foundation for success. In the months that followed, Haven's user base doubled again. Investors came knocking. We partnered with several nonprofits focused on financial education and family debt awareness. I even started a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name for students studying business ethics. One night, after a late investor meeting, I opened my email and saw a new message in my spam folder. The sender, Emily Carter. The subject line, "You win." The message was short, just 5 words. "They lost the house. You happy?" I stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to feel guilt, but I didn't. Not this time. Because that house wasn't just theirs. It had been my grandmother's. It had been stolen, twisted into a lie. Losing it wasn't punishment. It was consequence. Still, I didn't reply. I archived the email, turned off my computer, and stepped out onto my balcony. The city lights stretched below me, endless, alive, and free. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. But I wasn't done yet. Because 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected letter. Not from Emily. Not from my parents. From a lawyer. The letter was simple. Notice of civil action. Carter Family Enterprises versus Noah Carter. They were suing me. For defamation. And I smiled. Because if they wanted a fight in court, I was ready. I had receipts. And this time, I wasn't playing defense. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap, not because I was surprised, but because it was so perfectly them. When manipulation stopped working, when sympathy ran out, they reached for the last weapon they had, intimidation. But this time, I wasn't the same kid they could guilt into silence. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Their claim was ridiculous, defamation and intentional emotional distress. Emily and my parents had filed it together, claiming that my false public statements had caused the collapse of their business and irreparable damage to their reputations. They wanted $250,000 in damages. I remember sitting at my desk, reading the complaint, and laughing, not out of arrogance, but out of disbelief that they still didn't understand who they were dealing with. The old Noah, the people pleaser, the fixer, the one who apologized just to keep the peace, would have been terrified. But that guy was gone. I forwarded the document to my attorney, Lauren, a sharp, composed woman I'd met through the startup accelerator. When she called me later that day, she sounded almost amused. "So," she said, "your family really decided to sue you?" "Apparently," I said. "Guess they want their 15 minutes." Lauren chuckled softly. "Don't worry. This is paper thin. They're the ones who defamed you. Once we file a counterclaim, they'll realize they picked the wrong fight." I trusted her completely. Over the next few weeks, we gathered everything. Every screenshot, email, fraudulent document, voicemail, and even the police report from Emily's loan scam. Lauren's paralegal organized it all into a mountain of evidence so thorough it could have been a Netflix special. When the pretrial hearing date arrived, I flew back to my hometown for the first time in over a year. The moment I landed, I felt that old mix of dread and familiarity, like walking through a dream you thought you'd woken up from. The courthouse was small, the kind where everyone knew each other. As I walked through the doors, I spotted them sitting together, my parents and Emily, a united front of quiet hostility. My father's jaw was set like stone, my mother's eyes were red-rimmed but sharp, and Emily, she looked tired. Pale, a little older, but her smirk was still there. When our eyes met, she didn't look ashamed. She looked angry. I didn't say a word. I just nodded politely to my attorney and took my seat. The judge, a gray-haired man with the patience of a saint, began reviewing the case. The plaintiff's lawyer, an older gentleman clearly out of his depth, started with an emotional monologue about a family torn apart by lies. He painted Emily as a victim, a young entrepreneur whose reputation was destroyed by a jealous brother's vendetta. Lauren let him finish, expression unreadable. Then she stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the defense would like to present evidence contradicting every single claim made in this complaint." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She just started laying out the truth. First, the fraudulent loan documents. Then, the bank statements. Then, the identity theft report with Emily's name on it. Then, the signed affidavit from the financing company confirming that she'd used my information. And finally, the social media posts, the Facebook rant, the LinkedIn business scam, the fake Yelp review, and the threatening note she'd left on my door. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper. Every detail, every receipt, every trace of manipulation was right there, under oath. At one point, the judge actually looked over his glasses and said, "Miss Carter, are you aware that these documents you submitted to financial institutions using your brother's identity constitute multiple felonies?" Emily's face went pale. Her lawyer tried to interject, but the judge cut him off. "No, counselor. I'd like to hear from your client." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a trembling voice, she muttered, I didn't mean to cause harm." Lauren didn't even blink. "Intent doesn't erase consequence," she said. My parents just sat there, stunned. My mother's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. By the end of that hearing, the case was over before it even began. The judge dismissed their complaint with prejudice, meaning they couldn't file again. Not only that, but he granted our motion for legal fees. They'd have to pay for my attorney costs in full. And as for Emily's fraud, the judge referred it to the district attorney for potential criminal investigation. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt quiet. Outside the courthouse, Lauren turned to me. You handled that better than most people would have. I didn't win, I said softly. I just stopped losing. She gave me a small nod. Sometimes, that's what victory looks like. That night, I checked into a hotel downtown. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but what I mostly felt was empty. It's strange. You spend years waiting for justice, and when it finally arrives, it doesn't come with trumpets or applause. It's just silence. The kind of silence where you finally realize you don't owe anyone anything anymore. The next morning, I went back to my childhood home one last time. It had been foreclosed after their business collapsed. The "for sale" sign leaned crookedly in the yard. I walked up the cracked driveway, leaves crunching under my shoes, and looked at the house that had once been the center of everything. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners. Through the front window, I could see the old living room. Empty. Bare. It struck me how symbolic that was. A house built on memories, now hollowed out by greed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. You got what you wanted. I hope you're proud of yourself. No name, but I didn't need one. It was Mom. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back. I didn't want to win. I just wanted peace. She never replied. A month later, the investigation into Emily's fraud quietly moved forward. She accepted a plea deal, probation, restitution payments, and community service. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to see her face again. I'd already seen what I needed to. The truth laid bare. As for my parents, they sold what little they had left and moved in with distant relatives in another state. No calls, no letters, just silence, and I let it stay that way. Life, meanwhile, kept moving forward for me. Haven reached 1 million users that year. We expanded internationally, got featured in major finance publications, and even landed a partnership with a university program teaching students how to manage money. People started calling me the guy who turned pain into purpose. I never corrected them. It wasn't exactly wrong, but I never told anyone the full story. Not the Reddit posts, not the courtroom scene, not the text messages that still sometimes woke me up at night. Because some stories aren't meant for sympathy. They're meant for closure. One evening, months later, I got an email from my bank confirming that the last of Emily's restitution payments had gone through. It was the last tie connecting us, a legal reminder that, once upon a time, she'd stolen from me. And now, finally, it was repaid. I deleted the email, leaned back in my chair, and looked out at the Seattle skyline glowing against the night. For the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't bitter. I was free. I poured myself a drink, raised the glass to the window, and said quietly to no one in particular, "Here's to peace that doesn't need permission." Then I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and let the silence stay. Because after everything, the manipulation, the betrayal, the years of guilt, I finally understood the truth. Walking away wasn't losing. It was winning quietly. And that was enough.